When I was 16 or 17, I lived in a decent part of the UK, an average neighborhood where things felt safe enough. But if you walked about 20 minutes out, you'd hit some rough areas, places notorious for crime and all sorts of trouble. My friend, another girl my age, and I were headed to a park about 40 minutes away to meet up with the rest of our friends, all girls around the same age. To get there, we had to cut through the edge of one of these dodgy estates, right on the border of the worst part. It was around 6 p.m., late in the year as winter was creeping in. The sky wasn't fully dark yet, but the streetlights were glowing, casting that orangey hue over the evening. We were strolling along a pathway, giggling about the silly stuff teens obsess over, completely wrapped up in our own world. I was on the inside, closer to the road, while my friend walked on the outside, near a line of bushes that stretched into an open field. The street beside us was a standard two-way road, nothing special. Out of nowhere, the screech of tires snapped us out of our chatter. A black car came speeding up from behind, the noise sharp and jarring. As it pulled level with us, still moving as we walked, I caught sight of a guy hanging out of the passenger window, leaning so far out he was barely a foot from grabbing me. My heart stopped when I looked up and saw his face, or lack of one. He was wearing a terrifying mask, the kind with an exaggerated, cartoonish grin, like something ripped from The Purge. I screamed, my brain scrambling to process it. The guy's arms stretched toward me, fingers clawing at the air, so close I could feel the threat of his reach. Instinct took over. I grabbed my friend's arm, and we bolted into the field to our left, sprinting through the grass. It probably wasn't the smartest move, diving into an unlit open space, but all I could think was get away from the road. The field felt darker, emptier, with no streetlights to guide us. My fight or flight was in overdrive, heart pounding in my ears. We crouched low behind the bushes, close enough to the path to feel its presence but hidden from the road. The car didn't stop. It just slowed as it passed, the guy still leaning out, his mask's grotesque smile catching the streetlight's glow. Then we heard the engine rev, tires squealing as they sped off, the sound fading into the distance. We stayed there, huddled, trying to calm each other down. It's just a stupid prank, we told ourselves, picturing a bunch of young lads out to scare people for kicks. After about 10 minutes, we convinced ourselves it was safe to move. We decided to keep going toward the park, but instead of sticking to the road, we took a shortcut through the field, figuring it couldn't be any worse than the lit path that had just betrayed us. The grass was damp, and our shoes sank slightly with each step, but we pressed on, nerves still jangling. We made it to the park, shaken but safe. By the time we got there, 3 of our friends had already left, probably tired of waiting. 2 others were still there, so our group was 4 in total. The park was small, quiet, with barely anyone else around, just a couple of dog walkers in the distance. We filled the others in on what happened, their eyes widening as we described the masked guy in the car. They were freaked out, and honestly, so were we, reliving it as we spoke. We decided to ditch the park and head to a chip shop about 5 minutes away for some cheesy chips, craving the comfort of greasy food and a brighter, busier spot. Walking in pairs along a narrow pathway, we were still buzzing from the story, our voices overlapping as we recounted every detail. Then, out of nowhere, the air split with that same gut-wrenching screech of tires. My friend and I whipped around, and there it was, the same damn black car, unmistakable, tearing toward us. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a coincidence. I got a better look this time. The men inside weren't boys. They were well-built, tall, and the driver had a beard poking out from under his mask, the same creepy, grinning kind as before. My voice cracked as I yelled, "Run!" to the others, urging them toward the chip shop. The car pulled up alongside us as we ran, 2 men now leaning out, one from the passenger window, the other from the back, both reaching for the girls closest to the road. Their masks gleamed under the streetlights, and they were laughing, this unhinged, psychotic cackle that made my skin crawl. It wasn't a prank anymore. It felt malicious, dangerous. There were no bushes to hide behind this time, just open pavement. We stopped running for a split second, hoping they'd pass so we could dart across the road to the chip shop. The car sped by, but then it stopped, tires screeching again as it reversed toward us at high speed. My heart was in my throat, legs burning as we sprinted. It missed us by inches, the engine roaring like a predator. I didn't look back, just ran, my mind screaming that these guys meant to do real harm. We burst into the chip shop breathless, all four of us shaking. The bright lights and smell of frying oil felt like a lifeline. The car was still outside, parked in view, engine revving ominously. All the men had their masks on now, tilting their heads side to side in this eerie, taunting way, those huge grins mocking us. We spilled the whole story to the guys behind the counter, who looked concerned and told us to stay put. We called our parents, hysterical, words tumbling out as we tried to explain. My friend's voice was trembling, and I could barely hold the phone steady. The car sat there for what felt like forever, maybe 5 minutes, before it finally peeled out, tires screaming as it vanished. Our parents showed up soon after, full of worry and those classic parental reassurances that didn't quite land. They hugged us, lectured us about being careful, and promised it was over. But I couldn't shake it. The masks, the laughter, the way they chased us twice. I don't know if they were just trying to scare us or if they wanted to hurt us. The reversing, though, that felt like intent, like they wanted to hit us or worse. I'll never know why they picked us or if they terrorized anyone else that night. All I know is those grinning masks and that maniacal laughing are burned into my memory, as vivid now as they were back then. Years ago, when I was a young mom, I became friends with a couple who lived a few doors down in our apartment complex. The husband, a maintenance worker we'll call Carell, close enough to his real name that my young daughters found it amusing, seemed friendly enough at first. My girls, all around kindergarten age, would giggle when they saw him, charmed by his easygoing demeanor. But things took a turn when Carell's wife left him. The breakup hit him hard, and somehow I became his confidant, a shoulder to cry on as he poured out his heartbreak. He'd tell me stories like how he parked outside his ex-wife's new place for 4 hours, clutching a bouquet of roses, hoping to win her back. She'd told him to leave her alone, but he wouldn't listen. I tried to gently point out that ignoring her wishes wasn't the way to go, but he kept at it, stubborn and desperate. Eventually, he seemed to give up on her, and our interactions tapered off. We stayed friendly, but I didn't see him as often, our conversations limited to quick hellos and passing. One hot summer day, I needed a ride to visit my boyfriend, who was in the hospital. I didn't have a car, and the 2-mile trek each way under the blazing sun felt daunting. Carell offered to drive me, and I gratefully accepted. He dropped me off without issue, and after my visit, I walked home as planned, my sneakers kicking up dust along the pavement. I got back just in time for my ex to drop off our 3 daughters, all under 6, their chatter filling the apartment with life. The next day, with my youngest 2 napping and my 5-year-old playing quietly, I realized I was out of cigarettes. In a lapse of judgment, I stepped across the hall to a neighbor's place to bum one. I was gone maybe 3 to 5 minutes, close enough to hear if my girls called out, the open window letting in the summer breeze. When I returned, my oldest daughter looked up from her coloring book and said, "Mom, Carell called while you were gone." I dialed him back, curious about what he wanted. "Hey, how come you didn't call me to pick you up yesterday?" he asked, his tone light but probing. I explained that I'd planned to walk home and didn't need a ride. We chatted briefly, maybe a minute or two, about nothing in particular, weather at the hospital, small talk. As I hung up, my daughter's voice piped up again, hesitant but serious. "Mom, I don't know if you want to know this, but I think you do." My stomach tightened as I knelt beside her, asking what she meant. Her small face scrunched with worry as she said, "When Carell called, he said he likes to take off his clothes and play with himself and asked if I wanted to watch." The words hit like a punch. My heart raced, a mix of shock and rage coursing through me. That was it, Carell was done. I cut all contact, horrified that he'd said something so vile to my little girl. I filed a police report immediately, my hands shaking as I recounted what my daughter told me. The officer listened, his face grim, but said they couldn't act since no crime had technically been committed. It felt like a slap in the face, but I didn't stop there. I marched to the apartment manager's office and told him everything. Carell was fired from his maintenance job soon after, his toolbox and work boots vanishing from the complex. I thought that was the end of it, but the nightmare wasn't over. In the months that followed, my middle daughter, barely 4, started saying strange things when she woke at night. She'd always been a light sleeper, padding to the bathroom, or grabbing a sip of water before settling back down. But now, in her half-awake state, she'd mumble about Carell talking to me at the window. She'd say it happened while she was up for a drink or to use the potty, always after midnight. Each time, I'd rush to her room, heart pounding, and check the windows, the locks, the patio, nothing. No one was there, just the quiet night outside. I wondered if it was her imagination, child's mind mixing dreams with reality. But her words were consistent. He said he'd be my friend if I let him in. It chilled me, but I tried to stay rational. I was always home at night, wide awake past midnight, my maternal instincts on high alert. I'd do anything to protect my girls, and the apartment felt secure. Locked doors, bolted windows. Still, the fear lingered, a nagging weight in my chest. Then one night, I went to a dance with my boyfriend, leaving the girls with a trusted babysitter. We got home around 10:30 p.m., laughing as we climbed the stairs, only to freeze at the sight of police cars outside my apartment. My heart dropped. The babysitter, pale and shaken, explained that an unidentified man had tried to convince her to open the door. When she refused, he grew angry, yelling through the glass, then circled to the patio and pressed his face to the window, waggling his tongue at her in a grotesque display. Terrified, she called the police. My oldest daughter, clinging to my side, whispered, "It was Carell, Mama." My blood ran cold. Even after 2 police reports, it didn't stop. The final incident came one night when I was jolted awake by a loud pounding at my front door. I stumbled to the peephole, my pulse racing, and saw a police officer standing there, a flashlight casting shadows. I let her in, my hands trembling as she explained. Someone had called the police after spotting a man peering into my daughter's bedroom window. The caller had startled him, and he'd fled, but not before they got his license plate number. When the officer said Carell's real name, my knees nearly buckled. That was the last time he messed with us, the last time his shadow darkened our lives. Months later, my boyfriend ran into him at a convenience store. Carell acted like nothing had happened, all smiles and fake warmth, as if he hadn't terrorized my family. The audacity of it made my skin crawl, but I was just glad he was gone. Back in 2012, I moved 1,200 miles from my home state to a new city, a 22-year-old introvert starting fresh. I didn't know a soul, and the loneliness of being so far from my tight-knit family weighed on me. Determined to connect, I joined Meetup.com, browsing groups until I found one that resonated with my lifelong fascination with alternative spiritual practices. The group's vibe seemed perfect, and I signed up for their next event, a gathering at a local holistic center. When I arrived, the air was thick with the soothing scent of sandalwood incense, and the atmosphere buzzed with warm, welcoming energy. The owner, Rebecca, greeted me with a kind smile, her presence calming as she introduced me to the other attendees. Everyone was genuine, inclusive, and made me feel instantly at ease. For someone living alone for the first time, far from home, that sense of connection was like a lifeline. I had a blast chatting and laughing with the group, and before I left, Rebecca invited me back, her eyes crinkling with sincerity. That invitation turned into a routine. Soon, I was at the center 4 or 5 times a week, drawn to its community and the sense of belonging it offered. Early on, at a Reiki circle, a Japanese relaxation practice, I met Rodney. He was middle-aged, maybe late 40s, with thinning hair tied back in a low ponytail, his tan skin and muscular arms suggesting an active life. At about 6 feet tall, he towered over my petite frame. After the Reiki session, as was the group's custom, everyone exchanged hugs and lingered to chat. Rodney approached me first, wrapping me in a long, tight embrace that lasted a beat longer than I expected. As we talked, he shared that he was a single father and introduced me to his teenage son, a lanky kid with a shy smile. The 3 of us hit it off right away. Rodney and I bonded over shared interests: Thai food, scuba diving, a love for the outdoors. His energy was calm, almost serene, like a peaceful tide washing over you. He felt easy to trust, someone I could open up to without fear of judgment. Over the next few months, I got certified in Reiki and became a regular at the center. A core group of us grew inseparable, and Rodney was always part of it. We'd hold full moon ceremonies on the beach, the waves crashing under starlit skies as we meditated. We'd gather for drum circles at night, the rhythmic beats echoing through the dark, and spend days leading healing sessions, sharing energy and stories. Once a week, we'd pile into a Panera Bread, sipping tea and laughing over pastries, the table cluttered with empty cups and crumbs. It was one of the most joyful times of my life, a season of connection and discovery. Rodney and I grew especially close. We'd bump into each other at farmers markets, browsing stalls of fresh produce and handmade crafts. I volunteered to help him run a haunted house attraction he was managing, stringing up fake cobwebs and testing fog machines. I even attended his yoga classes as he worked toward his instructor certification, cheering him on as he led sun salutations. Our friendship felt deep but platonic. I never sensed anything romantic from him, and I certainly didn't feel that way. He had a girlfriend, someone I also grew close to, and he seemed devoted to her. To me, he was more like a fatherly figure, warm and protective. A year later, my apartment lease ended, and I moved in with my boyfriend, who lived 40 minutes away. Between the distance and a demanding new job, my visits to the center dwindled. I'd occasionally swing by their gift shop to pick up sage or crystals, the familiar scent of incense tugging at my nostalgia, but my regular days there were over. Rodney and I stayed in touch through Facebook, mostly him liking my photos or leaving short comments, little pings of connection that faded as life pulled us in different directions. 2 years passed without seeing him in person. Then, one day during my lunch break, I popped into a nearby grocery store for some summer rolls. As I passed the coffee bar, I spotted Rodney, his face lighting up like he'd seen an old friend. "Hey," he called, arms wide. He pulled me into one of his signature long hugs, rocking slowly back and forth, his grip firm. "You look great," he said, his voice warm. We caught up, standing by the coffee counter, the hum of the store around us. I told him about my new job, how I was back in the area sometimes. He mentioned that he and his girlfriend, our mutual friend, had split. He painted her as needy and insecure, which struck me as off. I knew her well, and she'd always seemed confident and kind. Then he shifted gears, talking about his new business plan, teaching yoga to wealthy older women. "They're lonely, neglected by their husbands," he said, his tone oddly calculated. "They want to be touched." I froze, unease prickling my skin. He went on, casual as ever. "I have a private studio now. You should come by. We can lay naked in the sun, do some stretches. It'd be really healing." My stomach churned. His words felt wrong, invasive, but I tried to brush it off. He was a hippie, after all. Maybe this was just his free-spirited way. Flustered, I stammered, cool, and glanced at my phone. "Oh shoot, I'm running late for work. Gotta go." "It was great seeing you." He leaned in for another long hug and then, out of nowhere, kissed me on the lips, a line he'd never crossed before. I pulled back, heart racing, and hurried out, the taste of his coffee lingering uncomfortably. Over the next few weeks, Rodney texted and messaged me on Facebook, pushing to meet up. I dodged him, claiming work kept me too busy, but then counter-gnawed at me. I tried to rationalize it. He was a friend. I'd known him and his son for years. He'd never betrayed my trust before. Maybe I was overreacting. Still, I avoided that grocery store, opting for different routes to steer clear of him. A couple of weeks later, I had to go back for a specialty item they didn't carry elsewhere. I stuck to the back aisles, eyes darting, hoping to avoid the coffee bar. Then I felt a hand on my shoulder and heard my name. My heart sank as I turned, forcing a smile. Rodney stood there, grinning. Another long hug followed, his arms lingering too long. He launched into a pitch about a new project, saying he wanted to hire me. "I have a vision for my space," he said, eyes intense. "I'll do yoga poses naked, shot in black and white. I want you to be the photographer." He knew I'd done photography before. My old camera is still packed away from my move. I hesitated, my mind scrambling. "Most of my equipment's still up north," I lied. "I don't have the right lenses." He brushed it off, insisting whatever I had would work fine. "Come by the studio tomorrow after work," he urged, giving me the address. "I want to give you a tour." "I can't wait to show you." I mumbled something about needing to let my dogs out, saying I couldn't stay long. but he kept pushing, his enthusiasm feeling more like pressure. The next day, I drove by the address on my way home, my hands gripping the steering wheel. The building looked nondescript, a plain storefront with darkened windows. My brain told me it was fine. I'd known Rodney for years, knew his son, trusted his hippie heart. But my gut screamed otherwise, tight knot of unease I couldn't shake. I kept driving, heading straight home. That night, my phone buzzed relentlessly. Rodney called 9 times, his voicemails a mix of forced calm and barely veiled anger. The next day, he called 14 times, most just ringing once before hanging up, a persistent jab that set my nerves on edge. After a week, the calls stopped, and I pushed the whole thing to the back of my mind, hoping it was over. Months later, I was at the center, catching up with Rebecca over tea, the familiar glow of the shop's fairy lights soothing my nerves. When I casually asked if she'd seen Rodney, her face changed, stern, almost panicked. "He's not welcome here anymore," she said sharply. "You need to stay away from him." Curious and a little alarmed, I mentioned how strange he'd acted the last time I saw him, recounting the photo shoot pitch. Rebecca's eyes darkened, and she let out a heavy sigh. What she told me next shook me to my core. Around the time Rodney was pressing me to visit his studio, he'd been arrested for brutally beating his new girlfriend, leaving her hospitalized with severe injuries. Rebecca teared up, describing the damage. Not long after, he was arrested again for sexually assaulting another woman, along with drug-related charges. The studio? Allah. He was broke, couldn't afford a lease, but had a key to the building because he was watching it for the owner, a friend who was out of town. Rebecca knew all this through Rodney's ex-girlfriend, the one he'd beaten, who confided in her from the hospital. My heart sank, my mouth dry as the reality hit. Someone I'd trusted, laughed with, considered a friend, had planned to lure me to an empty building with a fabricated story. I'd always prided myself on reading people, but he'd fooled me completely. The betrayal stung, shaking my confidence in my instincts, and leaving me wary of others. Looking back, I saw red flags I'd missed, his overly long hugs, the way he'd push boundaries under the guise of being free-spirited. My younger self had been naive, too trusting. That gut feeling, the one that kept me from his studio, might have saved me from something horrific. While gathering verification documents later, I learned Rodney was a registered sexual predator with a felony warrant issued shortly after our last encounter. I'm sharing this because I hope it might make someone else listen to their instincts, even when it's hard to believe someone you know could be dangerous. I was in 2nd or 3rd grade, around 2002 or 2003, when this all began. I'm a 21-year-old woman now, living in Canada, and what happened back then still haunts me. Back in elementary school, I was part of a tight-knit group of 5 or 6 girls, and one of my closest friends was Jessica. We'd spend hours playing together, often at her dad's place after school, because he had a trampoline and a slide in the backyard. Her parents were divorced, so she split her time between her mom and dad. Her dad, Richard, seemed like a totally normal guy. He was a pilot, a job that I figured required a sharp, stable mind. He was friendly enough, always welcoming us over. I'd have Jessica over to my house too, and Richard would pick her up after our playdates, so he knew exactly where I lived. Then, sometime in 2nd or 3rd grade, Jessica moved away to live with her mom. I was just a kid, so I didn't fully grasp what was going on. All I knew was that something had gone wrong with her dad, but the details were fuzzy. I didn't hear much from Jessica after that, but the next year, around her birthday, Richard reached out. He invited our whole group of girls to his place for what he said was a surprise birthday party for Jessica. Excited, we all showed up, ready to jump out and yell, "Surprise!" But Jessica never arrived. We ended up just hanging out with Richard for a while. As a kid, it didn't seem that weird to me at the time, but looking back, it's unsettling. When our parents picked us up, we told them what happened, and that was the last time we ever hung out with Jessica or Richard. Not long after, some of the girls in our group started receiving strange gifts at their homes. Cheap jewelry, mostly paired with handwritten notes. I never got any, but years later, my mom told me about them. She didn't know what the notes said, and honestly, I'm not sure I want to know. After that, Richard seemed to disappear. My mom later mentioned he'd been admitted to a mental institution, but as a kid, I didn't dwell on it. Life moved on, and I forgot about the whole thing. Fast forward to the winter of 2013. I was out of town for a cheer competition, scrolling through Facebook one night when a new group chat popped up. It was with 5 girls from my old elementary school group, none of whom I'd kept in touch with. The chat was buzzing with something bizarre. They'd all received messages from Richard on Facebook. Curious, I checked my other messages folder, and sure enough, there he was. The messages were a jumbled mess. Some were incoherent, others disturbingly clear. There were strange poems, ramblings about dreams he'd had about me, and a few that felt sexually threatening and violent. I won't share the worst of them, but here are a couple of the shorter, less disturbing ones. Christine, our little girl from not so long ago. So pristine. I want you, I want you, I want you. We'll have planets to visit someday, as long as you don't melt them first. I'm so proud of you, stay happy. I haven't found a way to keep you out of my mind yet. I can't see the planets until I make you all mine. We're just so rough, just so fine. If I'm theirs, why share? It's all about you, all I care about. I clicked on Richard's Facebook profile, and it was like stepping into a nightmare. His entire page was obsessed with the 5 of us. He had no friends listed, so it seemed like no one else was seeing this. He'd saved dozens of our photos, some from our profiles, some from who knows where, and reposted them with captions that ranged from long, delusional essays about his love for us to short, cruel jabs. Here are a few of the shorter ones. Emily, hopefully not too soon. I'll find your address. I'll show up as the man knocking at your doorstep and bite your bottom lip off before you can say a word. Sierra, my initial euphoria turns to sunken depression when I realize there's nothing I can do about anything beside you. You're inside me, and I can't get you out of my mind. I love you so much. Melissa, can I paint your picture? I want to lift you around to see how heavy you are. We'll go for a drive on Hollywood Drive, windows rolled down for a crystal clear view. I can't give it up as if I'm pretending I like it. You're just yanking my strings time after time, always the same. I notice you all pluck your eyebrows, but I pretend I have favorite things when really, I don't need them. I'm a good liar with a criminal mind like yours. We were all 18, fresh out of high school, and had no idea what to do. Our moms got involved and contacted the RCMP. The police told us not to block Richard on Facebook, but to avoid responding, as his messages could be used as evidence. He kept sending them every single day from multiple accounts, variations of his name, and one oddly named Esther Ban. We shared screenshots in our group chat and forwarded them to the RCMP. One of the girls reached out to Jessica to see if she still had contact with her dad. She only saw him during supervised visits now and then, and she was mortified, apologizing profusely. She was still the sweet girl we remembered, and none of us blamed her. Eventually, Richard was charged with 5 counts of criminal harassment. He pled guilty and was sentenced to about 5 months in jail. A no-contact order was put in place, banning him from reaching out to us or coming near our homes. He wasn't allowed to use the internet either. But predictably, he didn't follow the rules. By the summer of 2015, he was out and messaging us again on Facebook. I immediately checked with the other girls in the group chat, but this time it was just me. I contacted the RCMP right away and learned they'd accidentally left my name off the no-contact order. He knew not to contact the others, but thought he could still reach me. Things escalated. I just started a new job, and like an idiot, I had my workplace listed publicly on my Facebook profile. One day, I arrived at work to find a package waiting for me. I was confused. I never ordered something to be delivered to my office. I opened it with my managers, and inside was weed and a disk with encryption software. I knew instantly it was from Richard. I had to awkwardly explain the situation to my managers, who thought it was oddly amusing. The security team in my office tower was alerted, given a photo of Richard, and started walking me to my bus stop after shifts. It was terrifying knowing he knew where I worked. I hadn't seen him in years, but it was clear he was mentally unwell. I had no idea what he was capable of or what he wanted. The RCMP didn't seem to take it seriously, dragging their feet and passing the case between officers. Meanwhile, I was a wreck. I could barely walk down my street at night without panicking. Every knock on the door sent me diving under the kitchen counter, especially since I still lived in the same house from childhood, and Richard likely remembered the address. More packages arrived, more weed in different forms, including edibles, what looked like cocaine and ketamine, along with random items like a USB stick with audio recordings. I refused to listen to them and opened every package at the police station for safety. The return addresses were always a random P.O. box in another city, never linked to Richard, and creepily, no fingerprints were ever found. During this time, the Facebook messages never stopped. In one, he casually mentioned sending me drugs and a key, along with his home address, which confirmed he was behind the packages. He was charged again, and I received a subpoena to appear as a witness in court. But he pled guilty, so I never had to testify. Part of me was disappointed. I thought seeing him in person might give me some closure. As far as I know, he's still locked up somewhere, but the police haven't told me where or when he might be released. I live in constant fear, waiting for the day he contacts me again. Every knock on the door, every unexpected package, sends my heart racing. It feels like every time I think it's over, it's not. If I hear from him again, I'll be sure to share an update. Back in the spring of 2016, during my sophomore year of high school, I was itching for some adventure. I'm from Minnesota, but I'd moved there in 3rd grade from a small town about 45 minutes south of Milwaukee. Over spring break, I decided to visit my old friend Lance, who still lived in my hometown. We hadn't seen each other since 6th grade, but we kept in touch through Instagram and a Snapchat streak, sharing bits of our lives online. I was stoked to reunite with him. It had been way too long. On the first night at Lance's place, we grabbed some food at Taco Bell and started swapping stories about the wild stuff we'd done. Lance told me about this one time he and some friends snuck into a construction site, only to get pinned down when the cops showed up. They had to hide for nearly an hour before making their escape. That kind of thrill was exactly my vibe, and I was pumped to do something daring over the break. That's when Lance brought up an abandoned house near the Wisconsin-Minnesota state line, close to his friend Riley's place. He'd been wanting to check it out for a while, but hadn't had the chance. "You down to go tomorrow?" he asked. Hell yeah, I was in. I hadn't gone urban exploring in months, and I was ready to dive back into it. The next day, around 11 a.m., we picked up Riley, who lived nearby. The house was tucked away in a secluded area, surrounded by overgrown weeds and trees that made it feel cut off from the world. Riley said he'd been there once before, and that the same door he'd used was still unlocked. We stepped inside, and the place felt strange, like a construction project that was never finished. The air was dusty, and the floors were littered with random tools, a fridge with expired food, and an old microwave. It was messy but oddly empty, like the house was stuck in limbo. We started our exploration upstairs. Most of the rooms were bare, just empty shells with peeling paint and creaky floorboards. One room stood out, though. It had half a loaf of moldy bread scattered across the floor, like someone had torn it apart. We figured maybe a squatter had been crashing there. The attic was next, but it was completely empty, just a dark, musty space with cobwebs in the corners. Feeling a bit underwhelmed, we headed down to the basement, and that's when things started to get weird. The basement was massive, easily twice the size of the upstairs. As we descended the rickety stairs, the first thing we noticed was graffiti scrawled on the walls. One phrase stood out: "Saddam was here." It was so bizarre that I had to snap a photo. I always take pictures when I'm urban exploring. It's like collecting trophies of the strange places I've been. We poked around the basement rooms, finding nothing but more tools and some planks of wood. Then Lance spotted a crawl space tucked in a corner. It was low and narrow, but we were too curious to pass it up. We crawled through, expecting more of the same emptiness, but at the end of the crawl space was a door we hadn't noticed before. We opened it, expecting more abandoned junk, but what we found was completely out of place. It was like stepping into a normal basement from a lived-in house. There was a TV that looked straight out of the late 90s, its screen coated in dust. A fridge sat in the corner, stocked with popsicles and what I thought was pork, but it was so old and dusty it was hard to tell. An ancient bed frame leaned against the wall, and there were a bunch of boxes stacked nearby. We started rummaging through them. our curiosity outweighing the growing unease. The first box had arts and crafts stuff, glitter, pipe cleaners, and paper cutouts that looked like a kid's project from years ago. But when we pulled down the second box, our hearts stopped. Inside was a skull. A damn skull. The creepiness level shot through the roof, and we knew we had to get out of there. We bolted up the stairs, ready to leave, but as we reached the main floor, something caught our eye. There, in the middle of the room, was a pentagram, a satanic star, drawn in some kind of yellow liquid on the floor. We were certain it hadn't been there when we arrived. We'd only been in the basement for maybe 20 minutes, but that was enough time for someone else to have been in the house with us. Panic set in, and we sprinted for the door, not looking back until we were outside. Once we were in the open air, we tried to calm ourselves down. Maybe we just missed the star earlier, we reasoned. Maybe we were overreacting. About 50 yards from the house was a small lake with a dock, and tied to it was a paddle boat. Our dumb, curious selves couldn't resist. We climbed into the boat, figuring we'd take it for a quick spin. It had 4 seats. Lance and I took the front, working the pedals, while Riley sat in the back, looking out toward the shore. We paddled out, laughing at first, but after about 5 minutes, the current started feeling way too strong. We decided to head back to the dock and get to Lance's car. As we got closer to the shore, Riley suddenly lost it. He was staring at the house, and we followed his gaze. Through a sliding glass door, we saw someone, a man, peering out at us. He slid the door open and started running toward the dock. My heart was pounding. We didn't care about the current anymore. We spun the boat around and paddled like hell across the lake. Riley kept looking back, shouting that the guy was almost at the dock. We were all freaking out, our legs burning as we pushed the pedals harder. In the distance, we spotted a second dock, but the current was too strong to keep going. We pulled over to the muddy shore instead, scrambling out of the boat. Normally, I hate getting my shoes dirty, but right then I didn't care. We just wanted to get out of there. We sprinted through the mud, glancing back at the house. The man was gone, nowhere in sight. We made it to Lance's car, piled in, and sped back to his place in complete silence, our adrenaline still pumping. When we got there, we ordered a pizza and told Lance's brother, Mike, everything. He listened wide-eyed as we recounted the skull, the star, and the man. We spent the rest of the day trying to shake it off, watching movies and playing Super Smash Bros. Melee, but the unease lingered. 4 days ago, I was back in Minnesota, studying for a big chemistry test with some friends at a Starbucks. My phone rang, and it was Riley. "Hey, Owen, you remember that house we explored last year?" he said. "How could I forget? It was messed up, man," he went on. "That squatter, that star, it was bad. But I went back tonight with a friend, and it's way worse." My stomach dropped. He told me they'd seen a group of people behind the house, gathered around candles arranged in a star pattern. There was a swastika spray painted on the wall. "A cult," he said. "They managed to slip away unnoticed, but the thought of what could have happened if they'd been spotted, or what could have happened to us that day, sent chills down my spine. I still can't shake the feeling that we dodged something truly dangerous." A few weeks ago, my boyfriend was running late for work, so instead of dropping me off at my workplace, he left me at the metro station near his office. There was a stop just a short walk from my campus, so I wasn't too concerned. As I waited for the train, a stranger approached me and thanked me for my service. Caught off guard, I realized I was wearing my military backpack, complete with my last name stitched on it. Before I could respond, a man covered in face tattoos, dressed in dirty, smelly clothes, overheard and shuffled over. "Oh, you're in the military. My wife is too. She's the executive officer for your unit, actually. You look familiar. Were you at the holiday party at the racetrack?" His details were oddly specific, but I didn't recall anyone with face tattoos at that event. I brushed it off, saying I might know her, but it's a big unit. The train pulled in, and I boarded, hoping to end the conversation. I took a seat, but then I heard, "Smith. Amanda Smith. I knew I recognized you." I turned, and there he was, face tattoo guy, plopping down right next to me. My stomach dropped as he said my full name. He started peppering me with questions about my job and his wife, mentioning she'd been stressed and worried about getting fired. I found this odd since I knew she'd been let go over a week earlier. Maybe he was just being polite to avoid embarrassing her, I thought, trying to give him the benefit of the doubt. But then his questions took a strange turn. Where do you go for off-site training? When's the next session? Will you be training with her? A chill ran through me. Something was very wrong. I decided to get off at the next stop to escape him. As the doors opened, I stepped onto the platform, but he followed, his voice sharp. Let's go together. You didn't answer my questions. My heart raced. I reached for my phone to call someone, anyone, only to realize I'd left it in my boyfriend's car. Panicking but trying to stay calm, I told him I'd gotten off at the wrong stop and planned to catch the next train in a different car. When the next train arrived, I hurried to a different carriage, but he followed me again, his eyes locked on me with unsettling intensity. At the next stop, he started threatening me, his voice low and menacing, demanding information about his wife. Desperate, I stood up and made a scene, shouting, "I need help." A man nearby stepped in, and I seized the chance to bolt off the train at my actual stop. Shaken, I contacted the woman he'd mentioned. She revealed that since the holiday party, her husband had spiraled into heroin addiction and become violent. She and their kids had fled to a secret location after he tried to abduct them at least once. He'd become homeless, which explained why I hadn't recognized him. His appearance had changed drastically. He must have remembered me from the party, though, and was likely trying to track her down through me. She had a restraining order and a no-contact order against him and urged me to call the police if I saw him again. Terrified, I decided to ditch the train altogether and stopped using my military backpack, hoping to avoid standing out. Last week, I was working late and walked near the train stop to grab some food. As I waited at a crosswalk, I heard a chillingly familiar voice behind me. "Amanda, good to see you." I spun around, and there he was, face tattoo guy, standing just a few feet away, his grin unsettling. My blood ran cold. Without thinking, I took off, sprinting down the busy road, weaving through pedestrians, my heart pounding as I glanced back to make sure he wasn't chasing me. I've sworn off that train line for good, the fear still lingering every time I think about his voice calling my name. When I was younger, my mom was dating a guy we'll call JB. After a few months, he invited my mom, my brother, and me to join him and his son, who was about my age, for a weekend at his lake house. It was right on Lake Michigan, tucked away in a secluded area, which sounded pretty awesome. We arrived at the house, a small 2-story place, maybe 3 stories if you counted the expansive attic. The first floor had a cozy living room, a dining area, and a kitchen, while the second floor held 2 bedrooms. JB explained that his grandfather and father had built the place, and he'd lived there for most of his life, working as a tailor in a nearby town. The history gave the house a certain charm, but something about it felt off from the moment we stepped inside, a creeping unease I couldn't quite shake. We decided to grab some beach toys from the attic, where JB stored them to avoid hauling them out every visit. Climbing the narrow, creaky stairs to the attic, I noticed a corner draped in shadows, where about 8 mannequins stood, some just upper torsos, others full-bodied, covered in dust and cobwebs. It wasn't too surprising, given the house's tailoring history, but their silent, rigid forms still sent a shiver down my spine. My brother and I exchanged uneasy glances, but we grabbed the toys, brightly colored buckets, shovels, and inflatable rafts, and headed back downstairs, trying to ignore the eerie feeling. That night, JB's son and I were set to sleep in the living room on the couch, as there weren't enough beds for everyone. The living room was open, with a clear view of the kitchen and dining area, the moonlight casting faint shadows through the windows. Around midnight, as we watched TV, I heard a distinct squeak from the stairs. Thinking it was my mom checking to see if we were asleep, I whispered to JB's son to be quiet, quickly switched off the TV, and dove under the covers, my heart beating a little faster. We lay still, expecting footsteps or a voice, but the house fell silent. Minutes passed, and the quiet stretched on, unnervingly heavy. Curiosity got the better of me, and I peeked out from under the covers, my eyes adjusting to the dim light. What I saw made my blood run cold. In the kitchen, 3 mannequins were moving, not walking or bending their limbs, but sliding across the floor, their rigid forms gliding as if pulled by invisible strings. Their blank faces caught the moonlight, expressionless yet somehow menacing. I swore I was dreaming, my mind scrambling to make sense of it, but the sight was too vivid, too real. A small yelp escaped my lips, and I ducked back under the covers, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Then I heard it, a faint dragging sound, growing closer. Trembling, I peeked out again, and one of the mannequins was now just a few feet from the couch, its hollow gaze fixed in my direction. I yanked the covers back over my head, squeezing my eyes shut, praying it would go away. My body froze, every muscle tensed, as I waited for something, anything to happen. The dragging sounds eventually faded, and after what felt like hours, exhaustion overtook my fear, and I fell into a fitful sleep. The next morning, I woke up, my body aching from tension, tried to convince myself it was just a nightmare. I avoided looking toward the kitchen, afraid of what I might see. We spent the day at the beach, but the memory of those mannequins lingered, casting a shadow over the sunny day. When it was time to return the beach toys to the attic, I braced myself as we climbed the stairs. The mannequins were still there, but they were in different positions, no longer in the corner where I'd first seen them, and the dust and cobwebs that had clung to them were gone, as if they'd been wiped clean. My stomach churned, and I felt a wave of nausea. I told myself it was impossible, that maybe JB or someone had moved them, but deep down, I knew what I'd seen the night before wasn't a dream. I know this sounds insane, and you don't have to believe me, but I'm certain it happened. The terror of that night has stayed with me, and I've been scared to death of mannequins ever since. Even now, walking past a store display makes my skin crawl, those lifeless figures triggering a flood of memories from that lake house, where something unnatural moved in the dark. It started when my mother and her two sisters, Louise and Teresa, were young, fooling around in a cemetery of all places. Why they thought a graveyard was a playground, I haven't a clue, but they were kids, caught up in their own world. While playing hide and seek, my mother, running from Teresa, forgot the old rule about not stepping on graves. As she darted across the cemetery, her foot landed on a grave from 1907, one that bore her own name etched into the weathered stone. The ground gave way beneath her, and she stumbled into the shallow depression, her heart racing from the shock. The sisters, shaken but curious, scooped up some of the loose dirt from the grave and took it home, their young minds buzzing with ideas. Jimi Hendrix had just passed away, and Teresa, the eldest, decided they should try contacting him with a Ouija board, believing the grave dirt would amplify the board's power. That night, in Louise's bedroom, they set up their seance. They sprinkled the grave dirt around a Ouija board, lit candles to create an eerie glow, and turned off the lights, plunging the room into flickering shadows. The three sisters placed their fingers on the planchette, half expecting to reach Hendrix. Instead, a spirit named Amy answered. Through the board, Amy scolded them, her words sharp and accusing, calling them naughty girls for meddling with things they didn't understand. The planchette moved frantically, then stopped abruptly at goodbye. The room fell silent, an oppressive stillness that made their skin prickle. Suddenly, a wind rose outside, howling around the house with an unnatural force, sounding like a shrieking woman and a moaning man intertwined. There was no breeze in the room, yet the candle flames snuffed out instantly, plunging them into darkness. At the same moment, the lamp on the bedside table flicked on by itself, casting a harsh, unnatural light across the room. The girls screamed, their voices echoing through the house as they bolted from the room, running to hide in their father's bedroom, wedging themselves between the wall and his bed, trembling in terror. Once their panic subsided and the house felt safe again, they knew they had to act. They crept back to Louise's room, their footsteps hesitant, the air still heavy with unease. They gathered the grave dirt into a linen handkerchief, retrieved the Ouija board, and grabbed salt and matches from the kitchen cupboard. Outside in the backyard, under the starry night, they stood in a circle, holding hands, and recited the Lord's Prayer, their voices shaky but resolute. They sprinkled salt over the board and the dirt, poured gasoline over the pile, and set it ablaze, watching the flames consume the items in a crackling, purifying fire. They returned inside, exhausted and hopeful that the ordeal was over, trying to push the experience from their minds. For a few weeks, the house was quiet, and the sisters dared to believe the nightmare had ended. But then Louise, the youngest, began waking up screaming, plagued by horrific nightmares. My mother was next, her sleep shattered by visions she refused to describe. Teresa followed, each sister haunted in turn. My grandparents, quiet and practical people not prone to exaggeration, described those months as a torment of sleepless nights, rushing from one daughter's room to another, flicking lights on and off, comforting one girl only to be jolted awake by another's screams. This went on for months, a relentless cycle that left the family drained, until it stopped as suddenly as it began. Just as my grandparents started to feel rested, Louise's screams pierced the night again. She cried out for her parents, shouting, "There are people in my room." According to Louise, she'd wake to voices talking, and when she opened her eyes, her bedroom lights would be on, revealing a man and a woman standing in the corner. They were dressed in elegant, old-fashioned clothes, sipping cocktails and casually discussing the weather, as if at a party, oblivious to her presence. My grandmother, desperate to help, began sleeping in Louise's bed. For a few nights, nothing happened and the house felt calm. But one night, Louise shook her awake, whispering urgently, "Shoo." Before my grandmother could ask why, the bedside lamp switched on by itself, its lights dark and unnatural. My grandmother's heart raced as she scanned the room, seeing nothing but feeling an unshakable presence. She leapt out of bed, grabbed Louise by the arm, and dragged her to my grandfather's bedroom, where they woke him, breathless and terrified. They spent the next several weeks sleeping together in his room, too scared to face Louise's bedroom alone. When Teresa, now 18, moved out for college, they relocated Louise to her old bedroom, hoping a change of space would end the disturbances. The activity persisted, though it gradually tapered off into occasional, unsettling occurrences. That room, Louise's original bedroom, became a time capsule. My grandmother cleaned it weekly, but nothing was moved except Louise's clothes. The pea green shag carpet and orange and gold wallpaper remained untouched, even as the rest of the house was refurbished over the years. After my grandmother's death 10 years ago, the room was rarely used, except when extra guests needed a place to stay. No one ever lasted a full night there. Guests would end up on the couch, pale and shaken, refusing to explain why. At night, when the room was empty, you could hear voices, like a lively party, emanating from within, a constant murmur of conversation that sent chills down my spine. As a child, that room was the stuff of nightmares. My older cousins played cruel tricks, locking younger ones, including me, inside to prove our bravery. At 7, I was trapped in a closet, my screams muffled until an adult finally rescued me. The cousins used the room to scare us, forcing us to stay alone for 5 minutes to earn the right to play with them. Over the years, small bursts of strange activity rippled through the house, but the family grew accustomed to it, accepting the room as belonging to them, whatever presence lingered there. For the last 35 years, that room has been a quiet, untouched shrine to something none of us fully understand, its walls holding secrets that still make my skin crawl when I think of that long-ago night with the Ouija board. When I was 18, I was kicked out of my parents' home because I was part of a religious group called Jehovah's Witnesses, a tight-knit community that looked out for its own. My best friend, Ricky, who was in his mid-20s, reached out with an offer to live with him, as he had an extra room in his house. I was thrilled but hesitant, since he'd been married to his wife Melissa for 3 years, and I didn't want to intrude on their marriage. Ricky assured me Melissa was on board, and she even encouraged me to move in, her warm smile putting me at ease. So, in October 2010, I packed my things and settled into their home, grateful for a place to stay. At first, everything was great. I shared the same work schedule as Ricky, so when he was at work, I was too, leaving the house quiet. To avoid being a burden, I'd sometimes stay out late with friends, giving Ricky and Melissa space to be alone, hoping to respect their home and marriage. About a week after I moved in, everything changed. I was out with friends when Ricky called, his voice tense. "Hey, where are you? You need to come home now, please." I'd never heard him sound so urgent, and my stomach knotted with confusion and worry. I rushed back, my mind racing, and used my own key to let myself in. As I stepped inside, I heard chaos coming from the master bedroom, loud thumps, like clothes being thrown around, and Melissa's voice repeating, I'm not going, over and over, laced with a frantic edge. I found Ricky in the living room, his face pale and drawn. I asked what was happening, my heart pounding as the sounds from the bedroom grew louder. He explained that Melissa was mentally ill, and these episodes happened from time to time. I was floored. Melissa had always been a sweetheart, her kindness shining through in every interaction, and I'd never seen a hint of this. Ricky handed me a small video camera and asked me to record her behavior, explaining that she didn't believe she had these episodes and needed to see how she acted, as she never remembered them afterward. Reluctantly, I agreed, my hands trembling as I held the camera, feeling like an intruder in their private struggle. Ricky opened the bedroom door, and my breath caught. Melissa was sitting on the bed, her eyes wild, staring at him with an intensity that sent chills down my spine. Clothes were strewn across the floor, the room a chaotic mess. When she noticed me, she pointed a shaking finger and snarled, You did this." Her voice was deep, almost guttural, nothing like the gentle tone I knew, and I saw foam at the corners of her mouth, her face contorted with rage. I froze, too shocked to respond, the camera shaking in my hands. Ricky managed to coax her out of the bedroom and into the living room, where she sat on the couch, her body tense. I kept recording, my heart racing as she began speaking in a British accent, despite being Mexican, calling herself a strange name I couldn't quite catch. She rambled about trying to save her alter ego from a bad woman, her words disjointed and confusing, her eyes darting between me and Ricky. Then, without warning, she switched accents again, her voice sharp and aggressive, and started thrashing, lunging toward furniture as if to destroy it. She called us pig scum, her face twisting into something horrifying, her screams piercing the air. Between outbursts, she collapsed back onto the couch, laughing maniacally and pointing at me, shrieking, "It's you!" Over and over, her voice echoing in my head. The police arrived soon after. Ricky had called them just before I got home, I later learned. They took Melissa to a psychiatric hospital on hold, her screams fading as they led her away. As Ricky gathered his things to follow her to the hospital, he dropped the bombshell. He'd invited me to live with them for his own safety. My jaw dropped as he explained that Melissa's episodes had started soon after their marriage but had grown much worse recently. I stood there, reeling, feeling betrayed that he hadn't warned me about the extent of her condition. Melissa returned home a few days later, but I barely saw her. Whenever I was home, she stayed locked in their bedroom, the door a barrier between us. I was uneasy but relieved to avoid the aftermath of that terrifying night, tiptoeing around the house to avoid triggering another episode. About a week later, I was on one of the house phones, chatting with a girl I was seeing at the time. In the middle of our conversation, I heard heavy breathing on the line, faint but unmistakable. My friend asked if it was me, and I said no, my pulse quickening. Suddenly, the doorknob to my room rattled, followed by loud banging. A violent voice screamed, "Let me in. You're in my house. It's you." My friend heard it too, and panicked, her voice trembling over the phone. I hung up quickly, not wanting anyone else to know about Melissa's illness, my hands shaking as I tried to think. The banging grew louder, Melissa's voice now a guttural roar, and I knew I had to get out. The house was single-story, so I threw open my window, climbed out, and sprinted to my car parked in the court. As I fumbled with my keys, I saw Melissa burst out the front door, her silhouette wild and menacing in the dim streetlight, running toward my car. The court was a dead end, so I had to drive toward the cul-de-sac's end, turn around, and pass her to reach the main road. As I sped past, she lunged, slamming her hands against my car, her screams echoing as I swerved onto the curb to avoid her. My heart pounded as I drove away, her figure shrinking in my rearview mirror. That day, I decided I'd live in my car until I could afford my own place. I didn't have much, so it seemed like the safest option. Ricky arranged for his parents to move my belongings to their garage for safekeeping, and I picked them up later. Weeks after, as I sorted through my things, I found something chilling. Pieces of paper tucked into my suits, flannel shirts, jeans, even my shoes. They were covered in scrawled messages, Bible quotes, long rants blaming me for all the negativity, accusing me of having demons inside me that needed to be cast out. The words were erratic, written in different inks and handwriting, some barely legible, as if written in a frenzy. Reading them, my stomach churned, the weight of that night crashing back. It was the worst experience I'd ever had with another person, a haunting reminder of the darkness I'd witnessed in that house, and I've carried the fear and unease of those days ever since. I wasn't thrilled about leaving my friends behind before my freshman year to move into our new home in the countryside. The house originally belonged to my late great-aunt, who passed away from heart complications after suffering a stroke in the back room, which used to be a laundry room. The original structure was small, with just a living area, a kitchen, and that back room, a cramped 1930s layout where my great-aunt kept her bed in the kitchen for convenience. We poured our life savings into building a 2-story addition, thanks to my stepfather's skills as a carpenter. But his drinking problem cast a shadow over the project. Every time we visited during construction, we'd find piles of empty beer cans scattered across the site, their metallic glint a stark contrast to the fresh wood and nails. The tension boiled over into screaming matches between my mom and stepfather, their voices echoing through the unfinished rooms. It made the house feel hostile, unwelcoming, as if it was absorbing their anger and holding on to it. The air felt heavy with emotions the house hadn't known before, and it left an uneasy knot in my stomach. During the build, one of the workers claimed he saw a woman with a blank expression staring out from the kitchen window, even though no one was there. We brushed it off, but it added to the growing sense of unease. Construction eventually stalled when money ran tight, leaving us with a new 2-story addition, but the interior walls were incomplete, with exposed studs that let you see through the rooms, giving the house an eerie, skeletal feel. Despite the unfinished state, I was grateful for a roof over my head and set about making my new bedroom my own. I swept away sawdust, arranged my few belongings, and tried to settle into the strange new space. As we adjusted to life in the house, I started noticing odd things. The kitchen light would flicker on in the middle of the night, casting a harsh glow through the open framework of the walls. The toilet would flush on its own, the sound jarring in the quiet house. Footsteps echoed faintly, sometimes from the direction of the old back room, sometimes from the new addition stairs, creaking as if someone was pacing. At 13, I was a skeptic, not believing in anything paranormal. I'd helped with some of the construction and learned enough to chalk these things up to faulty wiring, an old foundation settling, or the quirks of a house caught between its ancient core and modern addition. Still, each incident chipped away at my rational explanations, leaving a lingering unease I couldn't fully dismiss. One evening, as everyone began their nightly routine, I headed to the bathroom connected to the back room where my great-aunt had her stroke. Stepping down into the laundry room, a sudden wave of dread washed over me, so intense it felt like something was pressing down on my shoulders, watching me. My heart raced, and I gripped the sink, trying to steady myself. I told myself it was just the house's uneven foundation or my imagination, but the feeling clung to me like damp air. I brushed my teeth quickly, avoiding my reflection in a mirror, and hurried to my bedroom, desperate to shake the oppressive sensation. By 11 p.m., I was in bed, the house wrapped in a heavy silence. Without ceiling fans or air conditioning, the air was stagnant, thick with the summer's heat. Lying on my back, I stared at the exposed studs of my room's walls, the open framework revealing my little sister's room across the way. I could hear my parents shifting in their bed upstairs, the faint sounds of sniffing and coughing from my family settling in for the night. Gradually, the anxiety from the back room began to fade, and I closed my eyes, feeling my body relax into the mattress. Then it happened. The foot of my bed sank, the box springs creaking loudly under a sudden weight, and the covers tightened over me, as if someone had sat down. My heart plummeted, and I froze, petrified, my breath catching in my throat. The sensation was unmistakable. Someone or something was on my bed. The dread from earlier surged back, consuming me, my pulse pounding in my ears. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying the weight would lift, that the moment would reverse itself, but it didn't. My mind raced, grasping for options. I could run, but what if whatever it was faster? I could scream, but that might alert it, make it react. The sounds of my family, sniffing, coughing, shifting, continued faintly, ruling out a prank. This was real, and it wasn't leaving. Seconds stretched into agonizing minutes, each one heavier than the last. I decided to pretend I was asleep, hoping it would lose interest and go away. I didn't move a muscle, my body rigid, my breath shallow, every nerve on edge. Finally, I couldn't bear it any longer. I made a decision to peek, just a glance. Slowly, I opened my eyes, letting my eyelashes filter through the dim light, terrified of what I might see. But there was nothing. No figure, no shadow, just my room unchanged. The relief I expected didn't come. The absence of anything visible only deepened my fear, as if the emptiness was hiding something worse. I lay there, sweating profusely, my body trembling, unable to shake the certainty that something had been there. Eventually, I turned onto my side, curling up tightly, and exhaustion pulled me into a restless sleep. When I woke a couple of hours later, the atmosphere had shifted. The weight on my bed was gone, and the oppressive dread had lifted, leaving only the quiet of the early morning. I stumbled out of bed, my body still heavy with fear, and told my mother everything. She's deeply spiritual, unlike me, and immediately believed my great-aunt's spirit had visited, perhaps lingering in the house where she'd suffered. I wasn't convinced. The experience didn't feel like a benevolent visit. It felt wrong, heavy with malice, like something evil had pressed itself into my space. I couldn't shake the certainty that whatever sat on my bed wasn't my great-aunt, but something darker, something that didn't belong. To this day, I'm sure I encountered something malevolent, a presence that left an indelible mark, haunting me with a memory of that night when the silence of our new home turned into something alive and terrifying. I'm a 30-year-old woman living in Texas, and I've dealt with my share of creeps, but what happened yesterday was beyond anything I've experienced. I don't drive and work in another city, so I rely on the bus, using the same stops almost daily. I started taking public transportation last year and have grown comfortable with a routine, which makes yesterday's incident all the more unsettling. After work, I stopped by a store to grab some soda, carrying a reusable bag with 2 liters in one hand and my purse in the other. As I approached my usual bus stop, a sheltered bench with a glass enclosure, I noticed a woman sitting inside. I'm usually shy and avoid sitting near strangers, but I was feeling sick, my feet aching from a long day on them, so I considered taking a seat. That thought vanished when I got closer and heard her muttering to herself, her voice low and agitated, like a storm brewing. I stole a quick glance as I passed by, noticing bags spread across the bench and her shoes off, her bare feet dirty against the concrete. She seemed homeless, and her muttering set me on edge, so I kept walking, stopping about 2 yards past the shelter to wait for the bus. Feeling uneasy, I set the reusable bag down on the sidewalk, the way the sodas pulling at my arm, and pulled out my phone to text my best friend about the situation. As I typed, I started catching snippets of the woman's words, her voice carrying in the still evening air. "Don't call me sweetie. I'll damn well murder you," she hissed, the venom in her tone making my neck prickle. My fingers froze over the screen, my heart beating faster. I wanted to look back, curiosity tugging at me, but I decided it was safer not to risk antagonizing her. I kept texting, trying to focus on my friend's replies, but the woman's muttering grew louder, more erratic. I caught phrases like, "Don't call me honey, don't call me anything," and then chillingly, "I'll wrap my hands around your throat and kill you." My stomach twisted, and I wondered if I should just leave, but the bus was due any minute, and the next stop was down the street. Exhausted and desperate to get home, I stayed put, telling myself she hadn't noticed me yet, her words just the ramblings of someone lost in their own world. Then her tone shifted, and I heard her mutter about a fat bitch. My heart sank. I'm not a slim woman, and the term felt pointed, though I hoped it was coincidence. But when she said, "Your phone doesn't scare me," my blood ran cold. She was talking about me, or to me, her words slicing through the air. I glanced to my side, and she was standing just outside the shelter, staring at me with a look of pure hatred, her eyes wild and unblinking. She was maybe a yard and a half away, too close for comfort, her disheveled hair framing a face taut with anger. She started again, louder now. "You gotta stop calling me sweetie," her voice rising into a snarl. Then came a torrent of disjointed threats. She said she wouldn't worship me, wouldn't let me corrupt her morals or her relationship with God, and kept circling back to how she'd murder me, her hands around my neck. I stood frozen, clutching my phone, my eyes darting around for an escape. The busy road next to us, connecting to a highway, roared with passing cars, giving me a false sense of security, as if help was close if I needed it. I was paralyzed, too scared to lean down and grab my bag, afraid any movement might provoke her. She sat back down, still muttering, her words a mix of threats and nonsense, and I felt tears prick my eyes, the weight of her hostility crushing me. I checked my phone, the bus was late, and I was near breaking point. She stood again, her movements jerky, her voice now a venomous shout, repeating her threats to kill me. My heart pounded as I saw a man crossing the street toward the sidewalk. Seizing the moment, I took a deep breath, leaned down, grabbed my bag and bolted, the soda bottles clinking as I ran. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting her to chase me, but she stayed put, her figure shrinking as I sprinted to the next bus stop. My legs burned, and my breath came in ragged gasps, but I didn't stop until I reached the next shelter, my hand shaking as I dialed the police. They connected me to the right department, and I explained what happened, my voice trembling. I admitted my description of her was vague. I barely glanced at her, too afraid to stare and provoke her further. I described her disheveled appearance, her bare feet, and the bags on the bench, but it felt inadequate. As I waited, a family member happened to drive by and offer me a ride, spare me the bus altogether. I sank into the car, relief mixing with lingering fear. Later, I learned from my brother, who lives in an apartment complex near that stop, that the woman had been sleeping there for about a week. He'd had a minor run-in with her the previous night, her behavior erratic but less threatening. When I checked the next morning, she was gone, and she wasn't there that afternoon either. Maybe someone else had complained, or the police had intervened. I hope she gets help, she clearly needs it, but I'm terrified for anyone who crosses her path. The memory of her hateful stare and those murderous words still haunts me, and I'm not sure I'll ever feel safe at that bus stop again. 2 nights ago, my partner and I were leaving the cinema after watching a film that ended around 11 p.m. It was a movie that had been out for a while, so the theater was nearly empty by the time we stepped out. We grabbed a coaster for our drinks and headed to the car park around 11:20 p.m., the night dark and quiet, with only a faint hum from the distant road. We had parked at the far end of the lot, having popped across the street for snacks before the film, so it was just us on that side, with few people lingering near the entrance, paying for their tickets at the machine. Tall, dense bushes lined the perimeter of the car park, separating it from a road on the other side, which was also unusually quiet for the time of night. As we walked, chatting about the movie, our voices felt loud in the stillness, our footsteps echoing on the asphalt. Suddenly, we both froze as a strange noise cut through the air. It was sharp and unsettling, like 2 cats fighting or gearing up for a fight, a sound that sometimes mimics a baby's cry. The piercing wail sent a jolt through me, my instinct screaming that something was wrong. My partner and I exchanged a glance, our faces mirroring the same creeped-out feeling. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. He nodded, his brow furrowed, and we agreed it was eerie, the kind of sound that sets your nerves on edge. We quickened our pace toward the car, our earlier conversation forgotten, the night feeling heavier around us. We reached our car, a small sedan parked under a flickering streetlight, and climbed in without seeing or hearing anything else. My partner started the engine, and we drove toward the exit barrier, my heart still racing from that strange sound. He inserted our ticket, the barrier lifted, and we pulled out onto the road. The car park exit led to a short, curving road that bent to the left, bringing us to a junction with a quiet road beyond. To the left, the road looped back past the car park. To the right, it led to some roundabouts and the motorway. My partner turned left, heading toward home, the bushes we passed earlier now on our left, the car park hidden behind them. As we drove, we both noticed a figure on the pavement, crouched low and facing the bushes. It looked like a man, tall and thin, his body curled into a tight, ball-like shape, his head tucked into his chest. The sight was jarring, his posture unnatural in the dim glow of the streetlights. I work in a job where I'm trained to notice odd behavior, and this set off alarm bells. He wasn't tying a shoelace or searching for something dropped, he was just crouched there, rocking slightly back and forth. My partner, who usually doesn't pick up on much, broke the silence. "What's this guy up to?" he said, his tone light but uneasy, which told me he felt it too. The area had a small drug problem, and there were often homeless people around, so I wondered if that was the cause, but something about his deliberate, eerie posture made me doubt it. I couldn't shake the feeling that he might need help. "Pull over for a second," I said, my voice tense. About 20 yards past him, we approached a small roundabout, and my partner eased the car to the left side of the road, stopping under a streetlight. I adjusted the passenger side mirror to keep an eye on the man, my breath shallow as I watched. For about 2 minutes, we sat in silence, the engine idling. Then he moved. He shifted onto all fours, his movement slow and deliberate, like an animal, and began crawling toward our car. My heart started pounding, my earlier concern turning to panic. I thought he might be hurt, struggling to move, and my instinct was to help. "Maybe he's injured," I said, my voice wavering. My partner grabbed his phone, ready to call emergency services if needed. Feeling naive but compelled, I opened my car door and stepped onto the pavement, turning to face him, my hands trembling slightly. As I turned, the man lifted himself up, standing upright in one fluid motion. He was tall and slender, his silhouette stark against the dim light, and he started jogging toward us, his pace steady and purposeful, showing no signs of injury. It was as if he'd transformed from a struggling figure into a perfectly healthy late-night runner, but he was heading straight for us, no hesitation in his stride. My stomach dropped, and I realized he wasn't hurt, he'd been pretending. "Get in," I shouted, diving back into the car and slamming the door. My partner didn't need to be told twice. The roundabout was clear, and he floored it, the tires squealing as we sped away, the man's figure fading in the rearview mirror. We didn't look back to see if he was still there, too shaken to linger on what he might have wanted. When we got home, we sat in the living room, the adrenaline still coursing through us, and debated what to do. We considered reporting it, but he hadn't done anything concrete. No attack, no clear threat, just behavior that felt calculated and wrong. All I could recall was his height and that he was male, the low visibility, and my panic left me with no useful details for a report. The noises we'd heard, that cat-like wail, lined up exactly with where he'd been crouching, possibly peering through the bushes. It hit me that he might have been watching us as we walked to our car, maybe even waiting for us. The thought sent a chill down my spine. Why was he making those sounds, drawing attention in such a creepy way? Was he on drugs, planning to mug us for money, or just out of his mind? I don't know, but the whole thing felt deliberate, like a predator testing the waters. I'm glad my gut kicked in, urging us to drive away before he reached us. The idea of him getting to our car, his intentions unknown, still makes my skin crawl, and I'm haunted by the thought of what might have happened if we'd stayed a moment longer. A few years ago, when I was 17, I was a 20-year-old female from Germany, caught up in a long-distance relationship that was burning through my pocket money faster than I could earn it. Train tickets to see my boyfriend were expensive, so I decided to put up a babysitting ad on a German website similar to Craigslist, hoping to make some extra cash. Not even an hour after posting the ad, my phone rang, the screen lighting up with an unknown number. I answered, expecting a routine inquiry, and was greeted by a man's voice, calm and polite at first. The conversation started innocently enough. He explained that he had an 8-year-old son and needed someone to watch him after school, as both he and his wife worked full-time jobs. I told him I was happy to help, mentally preparing to discuss my availability or experience with kids, my voice bright with enthusiasm for the opportunity. Instead of asking about my qualifications, he shifted the conversation in an unexpected direction. He mentioned that his son could be a little difficult at times. I brushed it off, saying I didn't mind and that I'd find ways to handle any challenges, drawing on my patience from dealing with younger cousins. But then he asked, "Would you hit him if he's being naughty?" The question hit me like a slap, and I froze, my grip tightening on the phone. I'm firmly against any form of violence toward children. Spanking, in my view, is abuse. Stammering slightly, I told him I'd never hit a child and would find non-violent ways to manage any issues. My voice steady but my heart racing at the strangeness of the question. He pressed further, his tone still calm but oddly insistent. "What if he was hitting you? Would you hit him back?" I answered with a firm no. My irritation growing as I realized this wasn't a casual inquiry. It felt like he was testing me, and the implication that hitting his son was routine sent a chill through me. He didn't let up, throwing out more scenarios, each one more unsettling than the last. He asked how I discipline his son in various situations, mentioning that his older babysitter frequently spanked him. My stomach churned at the thought of a child being regularly disciplined that way, and I struggled to keep my tone polite. I told him, as diplomatically as I could, that if a parent chose to use spanking, that was their decision, but as a babysitter, I had no right to lay a hand on a child. My words hung in the air, and he went silent for a long moment, the quiet stretching uncomfortably over the phone. Then he changed the subject, asking if I'd bathe his son. My mind raced, trying to process the shift. I don't recall my exact response, but it was definitely not a yes, something vague and non-committal, my unease growing by the second. He explained that his son was supposed to bathe every Thursday but hated it, and he wanted to know how I'd make him get into the bathtub and whether I'd strip him naked. The question felt like a violation, and red flags shot up in my mind, my pulse quickening as I realized this conversation was veering into dangerous territory. He kept pressing, his voice now tinged with a strange intensity, asking if I'd wrestle his naked son into the bath. My skin crawled, and I deflected as best I could, my voice tight with discomfort. I told him that tasks like bathing were a parent's responsibility, not a babysitter's, and suggested he handle it after work. But he wouldn't let it go, repeating his questions about forcing his son into the bath, each one more invasive than the last. I kept saying no, my answers growing shorter, my patience fraying as I tried to end the conversation without being rude. Finally, he said he'd call me back later, his tone oddly casual, as if we'd been discussing something normal. The call ended, and I sat there, my hands shaking, my mind replaying every word, the creeping dread settling into my bones. I immediately pulled my phone number from the ad and switched to email-only contact, my heart still pounding from the encounter. For unrelated reasons, I got a new phone number a few weeks later, which was a relief as I never heard from him again. The whole experience left me rattled, my stomach twisting every time I thought about it. I couldn't shake the fear that his son, if he even had one, which I started to doubt, might be in a dangerous situation. The way he spoke, so fixated on violence and inappropriate tasks, made me question his intentions, and I hoped desperately that no child was subject to his care. The memory of that call still lingers, a chilling reminder of how quickly an innocent opportunity can turn sinister, leaving me wary of strangers and their hidden motives. This story comes from my mother, who shared it with me years ago. It happened on Christmas Eve in the early 1990s, when I was too young to remember, something I'm thankful for now. My mother, grandmother, and I were returning from picking up a wreath to place on my grandfather's grave, who had passed away years earlier. The wreath was one of those sturdy ones with steel legs, designed to stand upright beside a tombstone, its pine needles fragrant and adorned with a red velvet bough. It was just past dusk, the winter sky deepening to a cold, inky blue, and the chill of the coming night settled over our small town in Illinois. My mother decided to wait until that evening to place the wreath, wary of recent deaths in the cemetery and the forecast of colder weather that might freeze the ground, making it harder to secure the wreath's legs. The cemetery sat on the outskirts of town, surrounded by a dense forest and sprawling cornfields, a lonely place back then before the nearby high school track was built. In those days, the area was wild, with coyotes often howling in the distance, their eerie calls a familiar sound in the open, rural landscape. As we drove toward the cemetery, the headlights of our old station wagon cut through the gathering darkness, illuminating the narrow road. My mother turned into the cemetery's entrance, the gravel crunching under the tires as she navigated toward the path leading to my grandfather's section. The air in the car was quiet, the weight of the occasion settling over us, the wreath resting in the back seat. As we rounded a corner, my grandmother, sitting in the passenger seat, suddenly gripped my mother's arm. "Stop the car," she said, her voice sharp with alarm. "What the hell is that?" She pointed toward the graves, her eyes wide. My mother slowed the car to a stop, her breath catching as she followed my grandmother's gaze. There in the dim light stood something neither of them could fully comprehend, a creature that looked like a large white dog, but was standing upright on its hind legs, not like a dog struggling to balance, but like a person steady and deliberate, its form eerily human-like. My mother still struggles to describe it, even years later. The best she can manage is that it resembled a massive dog, its white coat stark against the shadowed graves, but its posture was all wrong, standing tall about 6 feet with no sign of strain or injury. The car's headlights weren't directly on it, casting only a faint glow, but its eyes were impossible to miss, glowing a piercing white blue, like twin beacons in the dark. My mother's heart pounded as she stared, her mind grappling with the impossibility of it. This wasn't a coyote, she thought, despite their presence in the area. Coyotes didn't stand like that, didn't move with such unnatural grace. As they watched, frozen in the car, the creature began to move, not walking, but weaving, almost dancing, in and out among the tombstones. Its movements were fluid, circling the graves with a strange, deliberate rhythm, its glowing eyes fixed ahead as if unaware of the car. My grandmother clutched her coat, her knuckles white, while I, oblivious in the back seat, likely slept through the whole thing, too young to sense the terror gripping the adults. They sat there, paralyzed, for only a few minutes, but each second felt like an eternity. My mother's hands tightened on the steering wheel, her mind racing. Was it some kind of animal they'd never seen? Trick of the light? But those eyes, that upright stance, defied explanation. My grandmother whispered, her voice trembling, "We need to go." My mother didn't argue. She shifted the car into reverse, the engine rumbling as she backed out carefully, her eyes never leaving the creature. It didn't turn toward them, didn't acknowledge their presence, but the weight of its existence pressed against them, a silent warning in the cold night air. As they pulled away, the gravel crunching louder now, my mother floored it, the car speeding back toward the main road, the wreath forgotten in the backseat. They didn't stop until they were safely home, the warmth of the house a stark contrast to the chill that lingered in their bones. My mother still brings up the story from time to time, her voice low, as if speaking it too loudly might summon that creature back. My grandmother, who passed away since, never got to share her own account with me, but my mother swears it wasn't a coyote or any animal she could name. Its white coat, its height, the way it moved, none of it fit anything natural. The wreath never made it to my grandfather's grave that night, left in the car as a silent reminder of what they'd seen. After hearing similar stories over the years, my mother wonders if it was a skinwalker or some other entity, though she's never settled on an answer. The memory haunts her, that image of a white, upright figure dancing among the graves, its glowing eyes burning into her mind. For me, it's the most unnerving story our family has, a moment that makes the quiet of a cemetery feel alive with something far darker than grief. My great-grandmother lived in a tiny town called Willowbrook, about an hour and a half from our house when I was growing up. Every last Sunday of the month, without fail, my parents and I would pile into the car and make the drive to visit her. Her home was an old farmhouse, its floorboards creaking underfoot, filled with a smell that only truly old houses have, a mix of lavender, aged books, and wood polish that seemed to linger in the air. I always felt a strange connection to Great-Grandma Ruth. My mom used to say we were alike, both quiet observers who noticed things others missed. She taught me how to bake her special apple pie, the kind of the perfectly flaky crust and just the right amount of cinnamon. She showed me how to identify birds by their calls, cardinals with their sharp whistles, chickadees with their cheerful chatter. And she'd tell me stories about our family history, tales of ancestors no one else seemed to know or care about, like they were secrets passed down just for me. When I turned 16, life got busier. School, friends, and extracurriculars started pulling me in every direction. Last April, I begged my parents to skip our monthly visit so I could go to a concert with my friends. It was the first time we'd ever broken our ritual. My mom was disappointed, her face falling as I pleaded, but she eventually gave in. The morning after the concert, I woke up to the sound of my mom sobbing in the kitchen. My stomach dropped before I even knew why. Great-Grandma Ruth had passed away the previous evening, around 7 p.m., the exact time we would have been sitting down for dinner with her if we'd gone. The guilt hit me like a punch to the chest. I couldn't stop thinking that somehow my absence had let her slip away, or worse, that she died alone, waiting for us to show up. The funeral was held the following weekend at the old Willowbrook Cemetery, just down the road from her house. It was a bright spring day, the kind with clear skies and blooming flowers, which felt all wrong. It should have been raining heavy and gray to match the weight in my chest. During the service, my mind was a fog. I barely heard the pastor's words or noticed the other mourners. I just stared at the casket, feeling hollow, like part of me had been carved out. After the burial, everyone gathered back at great-grandma's house. The farmhouse felt different without her, like the soul had been sucked out of the walls. Adults stood around with plates of casseroles and sandwiches, talking in hushed tones about her life, her kindness, her quirks. I couldn't handle it. The air felt too thick, the conversations too forced. Around sunset, I slipped out the back door, needing air and space to breathe. I didn't plan to go to the cemetery. My feet just carried me there, down the familiar dirt path. The evening was getting chilly, and I hadn't brought a jacket. The cemetery looked different in the fading light, less like a peaceful resting place and more like something from a horror movie, with long shadows stretching from the gravestones like fingers reaching out. But I wasn't scared. I just wanted to sit by great-grandma's fresh grave, to talk to her one last time, to apologize for missing our last visit. I was about halfway to her plot when the air changed. The temperature dropped suddenly, not gradually like a normal evening breeze, but sharp, like stepping into a freezer. One second it was a cool spring evening. The next, it was winter cold, my breath puffing out in invisible clouds. That's when I noticed movement near the cemetery entrance. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light or maybe a kid who'd wandered away from the gathering at the house. But as my eyes adjusted, I realized something was off. It was a little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, with long blonde hair tied in 2 braids. She wore an old-fashioned white dress that seemed to glow softly in the twilight, not reflecting the light, but creating it like a faint halo around her. I froze. She stood perfectly still for a moment, just staring at me. Then she smiled, not a creepy smile, but a genuinely happy one, like she was delighted to see me. She raised her small hand and beckoned me to follow, then turned and ran toward the cemetery gates. Without thinking, I followed her. I can't explain why. It wasn't fear driving me. It was an overwhelming sense of familiarity, like I knew her somehow. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't from fear. It felt more like anticipation, like I was on the verge of understanding something important. I'd only gone about 20 feet when I heard my dad shouting my name. He was jogging up the path toward me, looking annoyed. "Eliza, we've been looking everywhere for you. Your mom's worried sick." I pointed toward the cemetery entrance. "Dad, do you see that little girl? The one in the white dress." He squinted in the direction I was pointing. "What girl?" "There's nobody there, Liz. It's getting dark, and you shouldn't be out here alone. Come back to the house." I turned back to where I'd seen the girl, and my stomach dropped. She was gone. No child in a white dress, no movement, nothing, just gravestones and growing shadows. But she was just... I started, then stopped. I knew how it sounded. Dad put his arm around my shoulders. "You're exhausted. Grief does strange things to people. Let's get you back." I let him lead me away, but I couldn't shake the feeling of the girl's eyes on my back. I kept looking over my shoulder all the way back to the house. Nothing. That night, I dreamed of running through shallow water, someone calling my name. I woke up gasping, my sheets soaked with sweat. We went back to our normal lives after that. I threw myself into school, trying to forget about the girl at the cemetery. Sometimes, I almost convinced myself I'd imagined her, a hallucination brought on by grief and guilt. For months later, in August, we visited my great-aunt Susan, great-grandma Ruth's daughter, to help sort through some family belongings. She lived in a retirement community about an hour from Willowbrook. She was in her 80s but sharp as a tack, with the same observant eyes great-grandma had. While my parents helped her organize paperwork in the study, I sat in her living room, flipping through old photo albums. Most were familiar, faded color snapshots from the 70s and 80s, older black and white images from the 50s. But then I found a small, leather-bound album I'd never seen before, tucked at the bottom of a stack. Inside were photographs so old they were stiff and yellowed, images of people I didn't recognize in clothing from another era. I was about to close it when I turned to the last page, and my blood ran cold. There she was, the little girl from the cemetery. Same blonde braids, same delicate features. She was standing beside what looked like a river, wearing a white dress identical to the one I'd seen her in. The photograph was clearly ancient, probably from the 1920s or 30s, but there was no mistaking her. The image was slightly blurry, but her eyes seemed to stare right at me across the decades. My hand shook so badly I nearly dropped the album. I must have made a noise because Great Aunt Susan appeared in the doorway. "Found something interesting?" she asked, coming to sit beside me. I could barely speak. I pointed to the girl in the photograph. "Who is this?" Great Aunt Susan took the album, adjusting her glasses. Her expression softened. "Oh my, I haven't seen this in years." She touched the photograph gently. "That's my baby sister, Eliza. My name. My actual name, not Elizabeth like everyone assumed, just Eliza." "Eliza," I whispered. Great Aunt Susan nodded. "She was 8 when this was taken. Such a sweet child." Her voice grew heavy. "She drowned that summer. Fell into the river while our grandmother was making dinner. By the time they found her, it was too late. I felt like I was going to be sick." When was this?" 1932. I was 12 then. It changed our family forever." She looked at me curiously. "You know, I always thought it strange that your mother named you Eliza. It's not a common name nowadays. Did my mom know about her?" "About your sister?" Great Aunt Susan shook her head. "I don't think so. Your mother came into the family when she married your father, and we didn't talk about little Eliza much. Too painful, even after all these years. Your grandmother might have mentioned it once, but I doubt it. She was only 4 when it happened. My mind was spinning. My mother had chosen my name without knowing about this long-dead child in our family, a child who had the exact same name as me. She looks like you know, Great Aunt Susan said, studying the photograph. Same eyes, same little chin." She closed the album. Family resemblances can skip generations. I wanted to tell her about seeing the girl at the cemetery, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I asked, "What was she like?" Great Aunt Susan smiled sadly. "Oh, she was special. Quiet, but noticed everything. Had this way of knowing things before they happened. Mother always said she had one foot in this world and one the next." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about little Eliza from the photograph and how she'd appeared to me at the cemetery. But there was something else bothering me, something I hadn't connected until now. All my life, I've had this irrational fear of water. Not just a dislike of swimming in deep water, that's normal. I mean, I panic when water runs over my face. Showering has always been a carefully choreographed routine to keep water from touching my face. As a baby, my parents said I'd scream bloody murder during baths if water got near my eyes or mouth. I'd feel like I was suffocating, like I couldn't breathe. The doctors called it a sensory processing issue. But what if it wasn't? What if it was some sort of memory, the memory of drowning? I know how crazy that sounds. I don't believe in reincarnation or any of that, but the coincidences are too much. My name, my appearance, my inexplicable fear of water, and now seeing the ghost of a girl who died nearly 90 years ago. A girl who shares my name and apparently my face. The next morning at breakfast, I casually asked my mom why she chose my name. "I've always loved it," she said, stirring her coffee. "I read it in a book when I was pregnant with you, and just knew it was perfect." "Why?" "No reason," I lied. "Just curious." I wanted to ask more, dig deeper, but what would I say? "Hey Mom, did you name me after the ghost of Dad's great aunt who drowned as a child and now apparently follows our family around?" I never saw little Eliza again after that day at the cemetery, but sometimes when I'm falling asleep, I swear I can hear a child's laughter, distant and faint. During thunderstorms, when rain hits my window, I sometimes get this overwhelming feeling that someone's watching me. Not in a threatening way, but like they're checking on me, making sure I'm okay. Last week, I was helping my parents clean out our attic and found my baby blanket in an old box. As I pulled it out, something fell from its folds, a tiny, antique silver locket. Inside was a faded photograph of a woman I didn't recognize and a lock of blonde hair tied with thread. "Mom," I called, holding it up, "is this yours?" She came over and looked at it, confused. I've never seen that before. Where did you find it? In my baby blanket. It just fell out. Dad took it from me, examining it closely. His face went pale. This was my great-grandmother's locket, the one with little Eliza's hair in it. It went missing after she died. Grandma told me they searched everywhere for it because it was precious to her. He looked at me strangely. How did it get in your baby blanket? I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because how do you explain something like that? Sometimes I think about visiting great-grandma Ruth's grave again to see if little Eliza will appear. But I'm afraid of what it might mean if she does, or worse, what it might mean if she doesn't. I've tried researching cases like this, looking for rational explanations. Maybe I overheard someone mention the name Eliza when I was little and created this connection in my mind. Maybe the fear of water is just a coincidence. Maybe I saw a real child at the cemetery, and my grief-stricken brain linked her to the old photograph. But none of these explanations feel right. There's something deeper happening, some connection between me and this long-dead child that I can't understand. I still have the locket. Sometimes I hold it when I can't sleep, and it feels warm in my palm like it was just being worn. I've never told anyone else about seeing little Eliza or finding the locket until now. It feels both terrifying and comforting to think she might be watching over me, this child from another time who shares my name and possibly something more. What scares me most isn't the thought that ghosts might be real. It's the idea that some part of us might remain after death, tied to people and places, unable to move on. Is little Eliza trapped here somehow? Am I? Are we connected in ways I don't understand? And if she found me once, will she find me again? It's been almost 4 years, and I've only told a handful of people about what happened that night on Lost Creek Road. Most think I'm crazy or was just tired and imagined the whole thing. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. For context, I was 23 at the time. My girlfriend, Emma, lived about 45 minutes away in the next county over. We'd been dating for nearly 2 years, and I'd made that drive hundreds of times. Lost Creek Road was the fastest route between our towns, a winding country road cutting through dense forest and farmland in Pinewood County. I knew every curve, every pothole, every single mailbox along that stretch. That night started like any other. It was late August, still warm and humid even after midnight. I'd stayed at Emma's until about 1:30 a.m. on a Friday night, nothing unusual for us. The drive back was always peaceful, barely any traffic, just me and my thoughts with the radio playing low. I remember feeling particularly good that night. Emma and I had been talking about moving in together, and things were looking up at my job. The windows were down, warm summer air rushing through the car. I wasn't tired at all. I'd gotten used to these late drives. It was about 2 a.m. when I reached the most isolated stretch of Lost Creek Road. There's this particular hill about halfway through my route that locals call Blackberry Ridge. It's nothing special, just a gradual incline that crests and then slopes down for about a quarter mile. I'd driven it 1,000 times. I was doing about 40 miles an hour, just cruising along. The moon was nearly full that night, so visibility was pretty good for a country road with no streetlights. I remember checking my phone quickly as I approached the hill. Emma had texted to make sure I was okay. The time was 2:07 a.m. As I crested the hill, I immediately saw something in the road about 150 feet ahead of me. At first, I thought it was a deer. They're everywhere out there, and I'd had plenty of close calls before. But as I got closer, I realized it wasn't moving like an animal. It wasn't moving at all. It was just standing there in the middle of my lane. It took my brain a few seconds to process what I was seeing, and even now, I struggle to describe it accurately. It was roughly human-shaped, maybe 6 feet tall, but there were no distinct features, no face, no limbs, nothing. Just a black silhouette, perfectly still, its edges shifting and moving like ink spreading through water or thick smoke, but more deliberate somehow, like it was alive. I hit the brakes instinctively, but I knew right away I wasn't going to stop in time. I was maybe 75 feet away, still going 35 or 40 miles an hour, and my heart sank into my stomach. I remember thinking very clearly, I'm about to hit someone. I tensed up, gripped the wheel, and braced for impact. But there was no impact. As my car reached the figure, it just dissolved, not like it jumped out of the way or ran off, but literally dissipated, like smoke being blown apart by a gust of wind. But here's where it gets really messed up. As my car passed through where it had been standing, I felt an intense cold rush through the entire vehicle. It was like someone had instantly replaced all the warm summer air with freezing winter wind, but heavier, denser. The sensation lasted maybe 2 seconds, but it was overwhelming. My skin broke out in goosebumps, and I felt this pressure in my ears, almost like being underwater. For that brief moment, it felt like time slowed down. Then my dashboard lights flickered, all of them. The instrument panel, the radio, everything went dark for a split second. At the exact same moment, my car jerked forward, like I'd stomped on the gas. I definitely didn't. My foot was still on the brake, but the engine revved hard, and the car lunged ahead. I had to fight to keep it on the road. I was completely freaked out at this point, my heart pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. I kept driving, probably too fast, for another mile or so until I reached the 24-hour gas station at the county line. I pulled in under those bright fluorescent lights and just sat there for a minute, trying to calm down and make sense of what had happened. Was I hallucinating? Had I fallen asleep at the wheel? I didn't feel tired, and I hadn't been drinking. I checked my phone. Only about 4 minutes had passed since I'd seen Emma's text. It felt like so much longer. I decided to go inside, splash some water on my face, maybe get a coffee. The guy behind the counter gave me a weird look but didn't say anything. I spent about 5 minutes inside, just trying to collect myself. When I went back out to my car, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. There was a strip of what looked like frost across the center of my hood, extending down to the grille and front bumper. It was maybe 8 inches wide, perfectly straight, running right through the middle of the car. The rest of the hood was completely normal, still warm to the touch from the engine heat. This made no sense. It was 78 degrees, according to the gas station's thermometer. There hadn't been frost in months, and even in winter, frost doesn't form in a perfect stripe. I touched it, expecting it to be just condensation or something I could easily explain away. But it wasn't just cold, it was freezing, and it wasn't exactly frost either. It was thicker, almost gelatinous. When I ran my finger through it, it didn't flake off like frost. It melted into this slimy, colorless goo that felt wrong somehow. It didn't feel like water or any liquid I've ever touched. It felt heavy and almost seemed to move slightly between my fingers before dripping off onto the pavement. The tenant came out for a smoke break and saw me staring at my car. He asked if everything was all right, and I mumbled something about hitting a patch of weird fog. I didn't want to sound insane. He gave me another strange look, but just shrugged and went back to his cigarette. The goo or frost, or whatever it was, melted completely within about 10 minutes, leaving no trace. There was no damage to my car, no marks, nothing. By the time I got home, there was no physical evidence that anything had happened at all. I barely slept that night. I kept replaying it in my mind, trying to rationalize what I'd seen. Maybe it was just a weird patch of fog, but fog doesn't stand upright in a human shape. Maybe it was my headlights playing tricks on my tired brain, but that doesn't explain the cold, or the way my car responded, or that strange substance on the hood. I didn't tell anyone about it for weeks. How could I? It sounded completely insane. I finally mentioned it to Emma, who was concerned but gently suggested I might have been more tired than I realized. I almost started to believe her. About 3 months later, I was at a small get-together at a friend's house. One of the guys there, Mike, had grown up in Pinewood County. We were having beers around a fire pit, and people started telling scary stories, just typical late-night stuff. Without thinking much about it, I started telling them about what happened that night. I expected eye rolls or jokes, but Mike went completely still. When I finished, he asked very seriously exactly where on Lost Creek Road this had happened. When I mentioned Blackberry Ridge, he went pale. Mike told me his grandfather had been the county sheriff back in the 70s. According to him, there had been reports of something similar in that exact same spot going back decades. The locals had a name for it. They called it Old Scratch. Some thought it was the ghost of a hitchhiker who'd been killed there in the 50s. Others said it was something that had always been there, long before there was even a road. What really gave me chills was when Mike described what his grandfather had told him about the few people who'd reported similar encounters over the years. They all mentioned the same things: a shape that wasn't quite solid, a sudden cold, electrical problems with their vehicles, and in a few cases, that same strange frost pattern. According to Mike, his grandfather had a file with at least 7 similar reports from his time as sheriff, all on that same stretch of road, all late at night, all describing almost identical experiences. The county eventually put up additional reflectors and warning signs on that curve, blaming poor visibility for the hallucinations, but Mike said his grandfather never believed they were hallucinations. I've tried researching it since then. There's very little online about Old Scratch specifically tied to that road, but there are forum posts from people describing weird experiences in that area, mostly vague, like strange feelings, sudden temperature drops, cars stalling for no reason. Nothing as direct as what I experienced. I've only driven that road during daylight hours since then. Sometimes I think about setting up a dash cam and making the drive at night again, just to see if I can capture something. But honestly, I'm afraid of what might happen if I encounter it again. The thing that still bothers me most isn't the visual of that shape in the road. It's the feeling I had as I passed through it, like for just a split second something was inside the car with me. Something cold and ancient and aware. And sometimes when I'm driving alone at night, I get this prickling sensation on the back of my neck, like maybe it followed me home that night and it's still there, just waiting for me to acknowledge it. I don't know what I saw on Lost Creek Road. I don't know if it was Old Scratch or something else entirely. But I know it was real, and I know I never want to feel that cold again. I still can't explain what happened to me that night 6 years ago. I've tried to rationalize it countless times, but nothing makes sense. I need to get this off my chest, even if no one believes me. I was 18, fresh out of high school, and feeling like I finally had some freedom. It was early October in Pine Grove, that small town in the Pacific Northwest where nothing ever happens. The air had that crisp fall feeling, with leaves starting to change but still clinging to the trees. You know that sensation when it's not quite cold enough for a heavy jacket, but the chill makes your skin tighten just a bit? That's what it was like. I was driving to my boyfriend Matt's house around 8:30 p.m. He lived in a quiet residential neighborhood with these ridiculous little roundabouts the town had installed a few years back, thinking it made them look fancy or European or something. The streetlights cast a yellowish glow that made everything look slightly sickly, like the world was under a faint haze. I was listening to a playlist Matt had made me, nothing special, just some indie songs we both liked. The night felt normal, just another Friday. I'd done this drive maybe 100 times before. As I turned onto Matt Street, I noticed the neighborhood seemed unusually quiet. No kids playing, no people walking their dogs, just empty sidewalks and dark windows. I didn't think much of it. It was getting late, and the temperature was dropping. I was maybe half a block from Matt's house when I noticed a man stepping into the road ahead. At first, I just slowed down like you would for any pedestrian, figuring I'd let him cross. He was about 50 feet ahead, standing under one of those yellowish streetlights, but something felt off immediately. He wasn't crossing normally. He walked with a strangely deliberate pace, each step precise, calculated, like he was measuring the ground beneath him. And he was staring directly at my car. No, not at my car, at me. I could feel his gaze, heavy and unyielding. I slowed almost to a stop, thinking he'd cross and continue on his way. But that's not what happened. The man stopped dead in the middle of my lane, facing my car, and just stood there, completely still. The light from the street lamp hit his face, and my stomach twisted. His expression was something I'll never forget. It wasn't just anger. It was an unnaturally fixed look of pure, absolute rage. His eyes were wide open, unblinking, with brows furrowed so deeply they nearly touched. His mouth was slightly open, like he was about to scream but frozen in that moment. And he wouldn't stop staring at me. I waited for maybe 15 seconds, though it felt like minutes, my hand started to sweat on the steering wheel. I tapped my horn lightly, just a quick beep to snap him out of whatever this was. He didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't move a muscle. I thought maybe he was having some kind of episode or was on drugs. I decided to go around him, easing the car into the empty oncoming lane. That's when things got worse. As I started to pull around, he suddenly stepped backward, then immediately forward again, deliberately placing himself in my new path. It wasn't a normal movement. It was mechanical, like watching a chess piece being moved. One step back, one step forward, all while maintaining that same unblinking, enraged expression. I stopped the car completely, my heart pounding. This was intentional. He was blocking me. Then, in one fluid motion, he turned exactly 90 degrees to his right. Not a natural turn like a normal person would make, but a perfect, mechanical pivot. Now he was facing the front of my car and began walking directly toward my hood, like he was going to climb onto it. I threw the car into reverse immediately, but before I could back up, he changed direction again, another unnatural 90-degree turn, and headed straight for my driver's side door. Panic hit me like a wave. I could see him clearly under the streetlight. A man in his 40s, maybe average height, wearing a dark jacket and jeans, completely ordinary looking except for that frozen face of rage and those eyes that never blinked. I frantically checked that my doors were locked, pressing the lock button repeatedly, hearing the clicks over and over as my hand shook. Then I slammed the car into reverse and hit the gas harder than I meant to. The tires squealed slightly as I backed away from him. The strangest part, he didn't run after me. He just kept walking at that same measured pace, those same even strides, like he had all the time in the world, like he knew something I didn't. I spun the car around in a messy three-point turn, my hand shaking so badly I could barely grip the wheel. I sped away, taking a different route to Matt's house, checking my rearview mirror constantly. The man never ran, never changed his pace. He just kept walking after my car until I turned the corner and lost sight of him. I took the long way around the block, my mind racing through explanations. Maybe he was drunk or high, having a mental health crisis, but nothing explained that unblinking stare, those unnatural movements, the deliberate way he blocked me. When I finally pulled up to Matt's house, I was shaking uncontrollably. I locked the car and ran to the door, pounding on it until he answered. Matt knew something was wrong immediately. I burst into tears, trying to explain what happened. His roommates, Jake and Trevor, were there too, and they all looked concerned as I described the man. He was just standing there, staring at me with this horrible expression. I told them, my voice trembling. He wouldn't stop blocking my car. He kept moving in front of me whenever I tried to go around. Matt tried to calm me down while Jake suggested calling the police. Trevor, always the practical one, grabbed a baseball bat from behind the door and said, "Let's go check it out." The four of us piled into Matt's car and drove slowly around the neighborhood. We checked every street, the small park nearby, even the convenience store on the corner. Nothing. No sign of anyone walking around. The streets were completely empty. What did he look like again? Matt kept asking. I described the man in detail. Medium build, dark jacket, jeans, brown hair. Nothing remarkable about him except that expression and those movements. We drove back to the exact spot where I'd seen him. The same streetlight was still casting that sickly yellow glow on the empty pavement. No one was there. Maybe he lives in one of these houses, Jake suggested, but something told me that wasn't it. We gave up after about 30 minutes of searching. There was simply no trace of him. It was like he'd vanished into thin air. Back at Matt's place, we debated calling the police. But what would I say? That a man with a weird face blocked my car, and then it disappeared? They think I was crazy or drunk. I spent the night at Matt's, jumping at every sound. The guys tried to convince me it was just some random weirdo, probably hopped up on something, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was something else, something that wasn't right about the way he moved, the way he stared, the way he disappeared. For weeks afterward, I avoided that street completely. I'd take longer routes to Matt's house just to avoid driving past that spot. When I did eventually have to go that way, my heart would race, and I'd speed up until I was well past that streetlight. I started to doubt myself after a while. Maybe I'd exaggerated the whole thing in my mind. Maybe he wasn't as strange as I remembered. But I know what I saw, that unblinking rage, those deliberate movements, the way he seemed to target me specifically. I almost convinced myself it was a one-time encounter with some unstable person. I moved on with my life, started college, eventually broke up with Matt, but stayed in Pine Grove because of school. Then, 4 years later, it happened again. I was driving home from a late study session at the library. Different car, different neighborhood across town. It was around 11 p.m., and I was exhausted, just wanted to get home and sleep. I turned onto First Street, about 3 blocks from my apartment, when my headlights caught a figure standing in the middle of the road. My blood ran cold instantly. It wasn't the same man. This one was older, heavier, wearing different clothes, but the expression was identical. That same unblinking, wide-eyed rage, that same slightly open mouth. And he was standing perfectly still, staring directly at me. I stopped the car about 30 feet away from him, my hands already shaking. Part of me thought, asterisk, this can't be happening again. This is impossible, asterisk, but it was happening. And worse, he started doing exactly what the first man had done. When I tried to go around him, he stepped back, then forward, blocking my path deliberately. When I honked, he didn't react at all. His eyes never left mine. This time, I didn't wait. I immediately threw the car into reverse, turned around, and took a different route home, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. When I got to my apartment, I looked out my window at the street below. Empty. Not a soul in sight, just like before. I didn't sleep that night. I sat up with all the lights on, trying to make sense of what had happened. Was I hallucinating? Was this some weird coincidence? 2 different men with the same bizarre behavior? Or was it something else entirely? The next day, I drove past that spot in broad daylight. Nothing unusual, no one strange, just a normal street in a normal town. I've thought about this constantly for years now. I've researched everything from mental health conditions to supernatural phenomena. I've looked into local history, thinking maybe something happened in this town that could explain it. Nothing fits. What terrifies me most is the possibility of seeing another one. Sometimes when I'm driving at night, I find myself slowing down before turns, afraid of what might be standing in the road ahead. I avoid certain streets entirely. I've mapped out routes that keep me on main roads with lots of traffic and bright lighting. I still live in Pine Grove, but I'm moving soon. I can't stay in this town anymore, not with this hanging over me. I need to know if this will follow me elsewhere, or if it's somehow connected to this place. I don't know what those men were. I don't know why they appeared to me, or what they wanted. Were they even men at all, or something else wearing human form? All I know is that normal people don't move that way. They don't stare without blinking. They don't appear and disappear like they never existed. Maybe I'll never know. But I keep watching, always alert, always looking ahead on dark roads, afraid of seeing that unblinking rage waiting for me again. I still get chills thinking about what happened that evening in Mapleton 12 years ago. I was 9 years old, and no matter how many times I've tried to rationalize it, I can't explain what my friend Tyler and I saw. It was a Tuesday in October, the sun setting earlier as fall settled in, bringing that crisp chill to the air. The leaves were just starting to turn, their edges tinged with red and gold, but still holding fast to the branches. We just finished our weekly Boy Scout meeting at the community center, and were waiting for Tyler's mom to pick us up. Our parents usually took turns with pickups, and that day it was her turn. We were sitting on a green metal bench outside the center, the kind with those uncomfortable slats that dig into your legs and leave red marks if you sit too long. The bench faced the road, and we were goofing around, talking about video games and other stuff 9-year-old boys obsess over. Tyler had just gotten a new Game Boy game, and was excitedly describing all the levels, his hands waving as he mimicked the characters' moves. The streetlights had just flickered on, casting a soft glow over the quiet street. It was that strange in-between time, not quite dark enough for full night, but the shadows were stretching longer, making everything look just a little different, a little off. The scout meeting had run late because our troop leader was drilling us on emergency preparedness, not first aid, what to do if you're lost in the woods, which feels ironic now, considering what happened next. I was munching on the last of my fruit snacks, the sweet tangy taste lingering on my tongue, when Tyler suddenly stopped mid-sentence. He nudged me with his elbow, probably harder than he meant to, making me wince. "Jason, look over there," he said, pointing down the street. About a block or two away, At the corner where Maple Street meets Birch Avenue, there was a little girl standing alone. She looked maybe 5 or 6 years old, definitely younger than us. She was wearing a plain white dress that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light, not like it was catching the street lamp's glow, but like it was giving off its own soft light. Her hair was long and dark, hanging past her shoulders, swaying slightly in the evening breeze. The weird thing wasn't just that she was alone, though that was strange enough since parents in Mapleton were super protective, always hovering over their kids. It was how she was standing, completely still, like a statue, staring straight ahead at the road, not moving a muscle, not even shifting her weight or glancing around. "Why is she by herself?" I asked Tyler, my voice low, as if speaking too loudly might break whatever spell was keeping her there. We both kept staring at her. "I don't know," he said. "Should we go check if she's okay?" But neither of us moved. Something felt wrong, like an itch you can't quite reach. We watched her for maybe a minute, and she never budged, never looked around, never did anything a normal kid would do, like kick at the ground or play with her hair. Just stood there, facing the road, frozen. Then it happened. A blue sedan came around a corner, driving at a normal speed, nothing unusual about it. The car passed right in front of where the girl was standing, directly in her line of sight. I tensed up, expecting the driver to stop or swerve, thinking they'd seen her too. But they just kept going, the taillights glowing red as the car continued down the street. And when the car passed by, she was gone. Not like she ran away or stepped to the side. She completely vanished. 1 second she was there, clear as day, and the next, nothing. I felt a cold sensation wash over me, starting at the back of my neck and spreading down my spine, like I'd been dunked in icy water. Tyler and I looked at each other, his eyes wide with the same shock I felt. "Did you see?" Tyler started. "Yeah," I cut him off, my voice shaky. "Where did she go?" We both stood up and started walking toward the corner where she'd been. My legs felt wobbly, like I'd been sitting for hours instead of just a few minutes. We didn't run at first. It was more like we were drawn there, moving slowly, almost in a trance. When we got to the corner, there was absolutely nothing. No little girl, no footprints in the slightly damp grass by the sidewalk, no sign that anyone had been standing there at all. "Maybe she ran between the houses," Tyler suggested, but there was no way. We would have seen her. The houses on that corner had neat, well-maintained yards with no big bushes to hide behind, and the nearest trees were skinny, recently planted ones that couldn't conceal anyone. We looked around for a few minutes, checking behind the street sign and even calling out softly, "Hello? Are you there?" But deep down, I think we both knew we wouldn't find anything. What makes this even weirder is what we did next. Tyler had gotten a digital voice recorder for his birthday a month earlier. He was going through a phase where he was obsessed with ghost hunters on TV, carrying that recorder everywhere, pretending he was tracking spirits. He pulled it out of his backpack and suggested we try an EVP session like they did on the show. I wasn't into that stuff at all. My family was pretty religious, and my parents always said ghosts weren't real, just demons trying to trick people. But standing on that empty corner where a girl had just vanished, I went along with it. My heart was still racing, and part of me wanted answers, even if they scared me. We sat down on the curb, the cold concrete biting through my jeans. Tyler pressed record on his little device, the red light blinking to life. He started asking questions, his voice cracking slightly. "Is anyone here with us?" he asked. I swallowed hard and added, "What's your name?" feeling stupid but also terrified. "Did we just see you standing here?" Tyler continued. We asked a few more questions, then sat in silence for about 30 seconds, which felt like an eternity when you're scared out of your mind. Then Tyler stopped the recording and rewound it to listen. Most of it was just our voices and the background hum of distant cars, the faint rustle of leaves in the breeze. But then between our questions, there was something else, a high-pitched scream, quick, just for a second, but unmistakable. It absolutely wasn't there when we were recording. My stomach lurched. And then, after our last question, a woman's voice, not a little girl's, clearly said, "Come out. Let's talk." Tyler dropped the recorder, the plastic clattering against the pavement. I jumped up from the curb so fast I nearly fell over, my heart hammering in my chest. "Did you hear that?" Tyler whispered, his face pale. "We need to go back to the community center," I said, my voice barely steady. I didn't want to run because I was afraid that whatever it was would chase us if we showed fear, so we walked quickly, constantly looking over our shoulders. The street felt too quiet, the shadows too deep. When we got back to the bench, Tyler's mom was just pulling up in her minivan, the headlights cutting through the dusk. She asked why we looked so pale, and Tyler made up some story about seeing a scary dog. We didn't tell her the truth. I don't think we knew how to explain it, and part of me was afraid she wouldn't believe us anyway. That night at home, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing that little girl in the white dress in my mind, the way she stood so unnaturally still. And that voice on the recorder, "Come out, let's talk," kept replaying in my head, clear and cold, like it was speaking directly to me. The next day at school, Tyler and I tried to make sense of what happened. He was convinced we'd seen a ghost, but I wasn't so sure. My family's beliefs made me wonder if whatever we saw was something darker, something that knew exactly what would freak out two 9-year-old boys. Because here's the thing, that little girl looked so normal, except for how still she was. She wasn't transparent or floating or any of the things you think of with ghosts. She looked solid, real, and that's what made it so much scarier when she vanished. Tyler wanted to go back to the corner with his recorder again, but I refused. Something told me that whatever we'd encountered wasn't something we should try to contact again. It felt like we'd already opened a door that should have stayed closed. A few days later, Tyler told me he'd lost the recorder. He couldn't find it anywhere, even though he distinctly remembered putting it in his desk drawer. His parents helped him search the entire house, but it never turned up. I've thought about that evening countless times over the years. I've gone through every possible explanation. Maybe she was a real girl who ran away very quickly when we weren't paying attention, but we were looking right at her, and there was nowhere she could have gone in that split second. Maybe it was a trick of the light, a reflection in a window that disappeared when the car passed, but both of us saw her too clearly for it to be just a reflection. What haunts me most isn't just seeing the girl disappear, it's that voice on the recorder. "Come out, let's talk." Like whatever it was wanted us to approach it, to engage with it, like it was trying to lure us. I've since read about other people's encounters with what they call shadow people or other entities that seem to appear just to create fear or confusion. Some theories suggest they feed off that energy somehow. I don't know if that's what we experienced, but it makes a certain kind of sense to me now. I've never seen anything like that again, and as far as I know, neither has Tyler. We drifted apart in middle school when his family moved to another state, but we reconnected on Facebook a few years ago. I finally got the courage to message him about that night, wondering if he remembered it the same way I did. His response gave me goosebumps all over again. "I think about that girl at least once a week," he wrote. "Sometimes I dream that I'm standing on that corner at night, waiting for someone to notice me. I'm 21 now, and I still avoid that corner when I go back to visit my parents in Mapleton." I've never told anyone else this story until now. Most people would probably think I'm making it up or that my childhood imagination ran wild that night. But Tyler and I know what we saw. We know what we heard on that recorder. There was something at that corner that evening that wasn't human, something that could make itself look like a little girl and then vanish into nothing, something that knew we were watching and wanted us to come closer. The rational part of my mind still tries to explain it away, but deep down, I know what I saw. And sometimes when I'm driving at dusk and pass a quiet street corner, I can't help but glance over, half expecting to see a little girl in a white dress, standing perfectly still, waiting for someone to notice her. I've been working as a ghost tour guide in Colonial Williamsburg for about 3 years now. I know, most people think it's just a tourist trap job where I spin spooky stories and walk backward while talking to guests. I used to think that too. I took the job because I needed the money while finishing my history degree, figuring telling ghost stories to tourists would be easy cash. I was so wrong. When I first started, they assigned me to the 8 p.m. tours. Those were fine, just a basic stroll around a historic district, pointing out the old buildings, recounting tales I'd memorized about hangings, sudden deaths, and restless spirits. Nothing weird ever happened on those early tours. Occasionally, a tourist would claim they saw something in a window, but was almost always a reflection or their imagination running wild after hearing my stories. Then my boss moved me to the 10 p.m. tours. That's when everything changed. Let me tell you about the first time I realized this wasn't just a job. It was a Tuesday night in October, not even close to Halloween, so the crowd was smaller, about 12 people. I was leading them to Bruton Parish Church, the oldest active church on the East Coast. It's a beautiful brick building with a tall bell tower, surrounded by a cemetery with headstones dating back to the 1600s. The air was cool, with a faint dampness from an earlier rain, and the streetlights cast long shadows across the uneven ground. I positioned my group near the cemetery fence and started telling them about the ghost of a little girl supposedly buried there, a story I'd told dozens of times without incident. But as I spoke, something caught my eye. At first, I thought someone was shining a flashlight at the bell tower, so I turned to ask them to stop. But there was no flashlight. Instead, there were these lights, not like flashlights or cell phones, but small orbs of bluish-white light about the size of tennis balls. They were circling the bell tower not randomly, but in a perfect, methodical pattern, up, around, down, across, up, around, down, across. The motion was hypnotic, precise, like they were following an invisible track. I completely lost my train of thought and stood there, staring, my mouth half open. One of my guests asked if I was okay, snapping me out of it. When I pointed at the tower, everyone turned to look. The entire group fell silent. We all stood there, watching these lights dance around the tower for a good 5 minutes. They moved in ways that defied physics, sharp angles, sudden stops, perfect circles. Then, all at once, they vanished. Not faded, not flew away, just gone like someone flipped a switch. One woman in my group started crying, her hands trembling as she clutched her husband's arm. A guy pulled out his phone and said he'd been filming the whole thing, but when he checked the footage, there was nothing but a dark tower against the night sky. I finished that tour on autopilot, my hands shaking the entire time, my voice unsteady as I tried to keep up the act. The next day, I told my boss about it, expecting him to laugh or brush it off. Instead, he just nodded and said, "That's why we pay more for the late tours." That was just the beginning. There's this spot near the church where the George with house stands. It's not particularly famous for hauntings, but it's part of our tour route. I always stand on this cement block in front when I talk about it, partly because it gives me a little height so everyone can see me, and partly because it's just become my habit. The block is weathered, its edges smoothed by years of rain and footsteps, and it sits at the corner of the lawn, where the grass meets the cobblestone path. About a month after the lights incident, I was standing on that block, mid-story, recounting the history of the With family, when something changed. It felt like someone had dropped a glass box over me. I could see everything normally, the people watching me, their faces lit by the soft glow of street lamps, the trees swaying gently in the breeze, but suddenly, I couldn't feel the wind anymore. The sound of my own voice became muffled, like I was speaking underwater, and the air felt heavy, pressing against my skin. I kept talking, trying not to freak out, my words stumbling slightly as I pushed through the story. One of my guests, an older guy with a graying beard who'd mentioned he was a paranormal investigator, pulled out an EMF detector. If you don't know, these devices supposedly measure electromagnetic fields that some people believe ghosts create. Most of the time, they're pretty quiet around Williamsburg, maybe lighting up 1 or 2 bars near electrical boxes or power lines. This guy walked over and held it near my feet, and the thing went absolutely crazy. All 5 lights bright red, the alarm beeping frantically. He moved it away from me. Nothing. Brought it back to the block I was standing on, full alert again. This lasted for about a minute. I was frozen in place, afraid to step off the block, but also terrified to stay on it. Then, as suddenly as it started, the glass box feeling lifted. The EMF detector went silent. The wind brushed against my skin again, and my voice sounded normal. I tried to play it off as a cool interactive experience for the tour, laughing weakly and saying, "Well folks, looks like we got a little paranormal action tonight." But inside, I was absolutely terrified. What the hell had just happened to me? After that night, I started noticing more and more things. It's like once you see through the veil, you can't unsee it. The William and Mary campus is on our route, and there's this administrative building there that used to be a school for Native American children back in the colonial days. It was not a happy place. They basically took kids from their tribes and tried to civilize them, forcing them to abandon their culture, their language, everything. The building is old, it's red brick weathered, with tall windows that reflect the moonlight in a way that always feels a little eerie. I've seen him at least 7 times now, always in my peripheral vision at first, a young Native American boy, maybe 10 or 11, wearing a mix of traditional clothing, a beaded tunic, maybe, and colonial-style pants. He runs, not walks, always runs, across the lawn in front of that building, his movements quick but jerky, like an old film where frames are missing. The first few times, I thought it was just a kid playing around after dark, maybe a student's younger sibling. But then I noticed how he moves. It's not quite fluid, like he's skipping forward in time. Once, I turned and looked directly at him. Our eyes met, and he stopped running for just a second. He stared at me with the saddest expression I've ever seen on a child's face, his dark eyes wide and glistening, like he was carrying a weight too heavy for his small frame. Then he flickered out of existence, like someone switched off a projector. I tried to film him, tried to point him out to guests, but no one else ever sees him, and he never shows up on camera. Just another thing that makes me question my sanity on a regular basis. The Peyton Randolph house is famous for being haunted, so it's a major stop on our tour. It's a grand 2-story building with faded pinkish walls and heavy, oppressive air, even on bright days. I used to think the stories about it were exaggerated. Not anymore. About 6 months ago, I was standing at the gate, telling my group about the history of the house. It was built in 1715, and multiple people have supposedly died there. A young soldier during the Revolutionary War, a college student in the 1800s, and others. The air was humid that night, the scent of magnolias lingering from a nearby tree. I was mid-sentence, describing a reported sighting of a ghostly figure in the upstairs window, when I heard it, a man's voice right next to my ear, so close I could feel the breath. "Shut your lying mouth, you stupid." It hissed, the word sharp and venomous. I gasped and spun around, my heart leaping into my throat, but there was no one there, just my group, looking at me with confused expressions, their faces pale in the dim light. I tried to laugh it off, saying, "Oh, thought I saw a spider," but my voice was shaking as I continued the tour. The voice came back, whispering vile things, calling me names, telling me I didn't belong there. It got so bad I cut that stop short and rushed the group to the next location, my hands trembling as I gestured toward the next building. When I told my coworker James about it later that night, he wasn't surprised. Apparently, the spirit in the Randolph house is known for being hostile toward women. James has never heard the voice himself, but female guides often report being verbally harassed there. Great, sexist ghosts. Just what I needed. The old jail is the worst spot on the tour, though. I dread going there now. It's a squat, grim building with thick stone walls and tiny, barred windows that seem to swallow the light. The first bad experience happened about a year ago. I was standing by the jail cell window, explaining how prisoners were kept in horrific conditions, overcrowded cells, rampant disease, minimal food. The air smelled faintly of damp stone and decay, even though the building is now a museum. As I was talking, I felt someone grab my ponytail and yank hard. It was forceful enough that my head jerked backward, and I let out a yelp. My group thought I was acting, adding some dramatic flair to the storytelling. I wasn't. It hurt like hell, and when I reached back, I could feel that my hair was tangled, as if someone had twisted it around their fingers before pulling. I've been touched there several times since. My hair pulled, my arms squeezed, once even feeling like someone shoved me from behind, hard enough to make me stumble. I started standing farther from the building when I gave that part of the tour, keeping a good 10 feet between me and the jail's walls. There was one night when I heard what sounded like multiple men talking inside the jail, arguing, cursing, their voices low and guttural. One voice rose above the others, clear and sharp. "She can hear us." I asked my group if they heard it too, but they all looked at me like I was crazy, their faces blank or mildly amused. That was the closest I've come to quitting this job on the spot. But the most consistently terrifying thing happens after all the tours are done, when I'm walking back to my car around midnight. Colonial Williamsburg is mostly deserted by then, with just a few security guards patrolling. The shops are closed, the streets empty, just street lamps casting pools of light on the cobblestones, their glow reflecting off the dew-damp ground. That's when I see them, the shadow people. They're not like regular shadows. They're solid, three-dimensional figures that look exactly like people from a distance. Men in colonial clothing, long coats, knee breeches, buckled shoes, walking purposefully down Duke of Gloucester Street. Women in long dresses, their skirts swishing as they enter shops that have been closed for hours. Sometimes children, running and playing games in the town square, their laughter faint but unmistakable. They don't glow or float or do anything stereotypically ghostly. They look completely normal, except they're there when no one should be. They never acknowledge me or anyone else from the modern world. They're just going about their daily lives, following routines established centuries ago. The first time I saw one, I thought it was another tour guide or maybe a security guard. It was a man in what looked like a shopkeeper's outfit, long coat, knee breeches, buckled shoes, walking about 20 feet ahead of me. I called out, thinking it was Mike, one of our senior guides who sometimes stays late. "Hey, Mike, you working overtime?" The figure didn't turn or respond. He just continued walking and then walked straight through the closed door of the milliner's shop, not opening it, but passing through it like it wasn't there. I've seen them so many times now that I've started to recognize some of them. The same figures, following the same paths at the same times. There's a woman who always crosses from the silversmith to the post office at 12:10 a.m., her bonnet casting a shadow as she moves with purpose. A man who stands looking up at the Capitol building for exactly 5 minutes, starting at 12:23 a.m., his hands clasped behind his back. A group of 3 children who play some kind of game with sticks near the magazine around 11:45 p.m., their giggles echoing faintly in the still night. I mentioned these sightings to my boss once, and his face went pale. He asked me very specifically what time I saw them and where. When I told him, he just nodded and said, "Try to leave earlier or later. Don't be on Duke of Gloucester between 11:30 and 12:30 if you can help it." When I pressed him for more information, he refused to elaborate, just said it was better not to engage with them, as if I'd been trying to strike up conversations with these things. Last week was the worst experience yet. I was leading my usual 10 p.m. tour, and we were at Bruton Parish Church again. It was a larger group, maybe 20 people, including a couple with a teenage daughter who'd been skeptical and eye-rolling the whole time, her arms crossed and her sighs loud enough to hear from the back. I was telling them about the lights I'd seen around the bell tower, trying to keep my voice steady despite the memories. The air was mild, with a faint breeze carrying the scent of fallen leaves. The girl suddenly grabbed her mother's arm and pointed. Sure enough, the lights were back, circling, dancing, moving in those impossible patterns, their bluish-white glow stark against the dark brick of the tower. Everyone was watching, some filming with their phones, their faces a mix of awe and unease. But this time, something was different. The lights were getting bigger, brighter, and they seemed to be descending, coming down from the tower toward us. I'd never seen them do that before. They always stayed around the tower. But these were definitely moving in our direction, picking up speed. That glass box feeling came over me again, the muffled sound, the absence of wind, but this time, I wasn't the only one experiencing it. I could see the confusion and fear on everyone's faces as they looked around, trying to understand what was happening. The EMF detectors that a few ghost hunting enthusiasts had brought were going crazy, beeping and flashing wildly. The temperature dropped so suddenly we could see our breath, even though it had been a mild night. Then the lights were right there, hovering no more than 10 feet away. They weren't just orbs anymore. They had structure, depth, like there was something inside them trying to take shape. One of them moved directly in front of me, and I swear I could make out a face within the light, just for a second, old stern, with hollow eyes that seemed to see right through me. Then it spoke, not out loud but directly into my mind, its voice low and commanding. "You don't belong here after dark. This is our time." As suddenly as they appeared, the lights shot back up to the tower and vanished. The glass box feeling lifted, the temperature returned to normal, and the EMF detectors went silent. Some people in my group were crying, others excitedly checking their phones. But of course, none of the footage showed anything unusual, just darkness and the dim outline of the church. I finished that tour running on pure adrenaline and fear, my voice shaking as I rushed through the final stops. When I got home, I seriously considered quitting. But the thing is, I can't. It's like I'm being pulled back there, night after night, like whatever is in Williamsburg has some kind of hold on me now. I still work there. I still do the 10 p.m. tours. I still see the shadows walking the streets after midnight. But now I hurry to my car, eyes forward, never looking too long at any figure I pass. Because I'm afraid that one night, they might start seeing me too. And I don't know what happens then. So if you ever take a ghost tour in colonial Williamsburg and get a guide who seems a little too jumpy, who keeps looking over her shoulder, who rushes you past certain buildings, now you know why. Some of us aren't just telling stories. We're living them. I'm a 20-year-old woman, and working standard jobs has always been tough for me, so I've been making ends meet as a delivery driver for Uber Eats. Most deliveries go smoothly. Pick up the food, drop it off, move on. But every now and then, my GPS app decides to throw me a curveball, sending me to the wrong address and leaving me circling unfamiliar streets. This one night, though, something happened that shook me to my core and made me swear off delivering after dark. It was my last delivery of the evening, and I was ready to head home. I picked up the order from the restaurant around 6:45 p.m., just as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fading hues of orange and purple. I punched the drop-off address into my GPS, double-checked the food was secure in the passenger seat, and set off. The app guided me through the city, past 2 apartment complexes, and into a quiet residential neighborhood. The streets were lined with modest houses, their windows glowing softly in the twilight. As I drove, I passed one particular house, and the moment I did, its porch lights flicked on, casting a stark glow across the lawn. I didn't think much of it. Some people have motion sensor lights, right? But something else caught my eye, a bright red SUV parked just beyond the house, right next to a cluster of bushes and a tree by the front door. The SUV had some pink writing scrawled across its back window, though I couldn't make it out from where I was. It stood out bold and garish in the dim light. I shrugged it off and kept going. My GPS, insistent as ever, directed me to keep driving down a narrow, private road just past that house. The road was barely wide enough for my car, flanked by overgrown shrubs and shadowed by tall trees. But when I reached the spot the app claimed was the destination, it was clearly wrong. No house, no apartment, just a dead end. I sighed, frustrated, and decided to get out and look around. Maybe the address was one of the nearby houses, or I could spot a number on the apartment buildings I'd passed earlier. I parked, grabbed my phone, and stepped out into the cool evening air, the faint smell of damp grass lingering around me. I walked back toward the house with the red SUV, since it was the closest to where my GPS had sent me. As I approached, the porch light snapped on again, even though I hadn't crossed in front of the property this time. The sudden brightness startled me, making my heart skip a beat. It was odd, too odd, but the light did let me read the house number clearly. Nope, not the right address. I stood there for a moment, scanning the street. The alley next to the SUV caught my eye, a narrow path running alongside the house, shrouded in shadows. I considered walking down it to check for other houses, but a gnawing feeling in my gut stopped me cold. Something about that alley, the SUV, the lights, it all felt wrong. My instincts screamed at me to get back to the car, so I did, my sneakers crunching on the gravel as I hurried back. I drove around for another 5 minutes, circling the neighborhood, hoping to spot the right address. My GPS, stubborn as hell, kept trying to send me back to that same dead-end road. Frustrated but cautious, I decided to stay in my car this time. I cruised slowly down the street, squinting at house numbers illuminated by porch lights or the faint glow of my headlights. None matched the address on the order. I was starting to feel uneasy, the quiet of the neighborhood pressing in around me. Then I did something stupid. I decided to drive by the SUV again, thinking maybe I could read the pink writing on the back window. Maybe it was a business sign or something that could give me a clue about the area. As I rolled past the house, the porch lights blazed on once more, and this time they stayed on. My eyes flicked to the SUV, trying to decipher the writing, but it was too far and too dark to make out. Then, out of nowhere, a face appeared from the bushes next to the SUV. My stomach dropped. It wasn't just a face, it was a person in a black ski mask, dressed head to toe in dark clothing. Before I could process it, they stepped out from the bushes, moving deliberately. My heart pounded as I saw them tap on the SUV's window. The passenger door opened, and another person, also in a ski mask and black clothes, climbed out. They both turned toward my car and started fast walking in my direction, their steps purposeful and quick. I caught a glint of something shiny in the hand of the one from the bushes. Maybe a knife, maybe something else, but I wasn't about to find out. Panic surged through me. I threw my car into reverse, my tires squealing as I floored it backward down the street. My hands shook on the wheel, my breath coming in short gasps. I glanced in my rearview mirror once as I sped away. The two figures had stopped walking, standing motionless in the middle of the street, just staring at my car as it retreated. Their masked faces were unreadable in the glow of the porch lights, but the image burned itself into my mind. As soon as I was a safe distance away, I pulled over and called the police, my voice trembling as I explained what happened. They were kind enough, taking my statement over the phone and promising to check it out. Later, they called me back to say they'd investigated the house. The SUV was still there, but it was empty and no one was at the property. They made sure I was safe and left it at that. I sat in my car for a long time after that call, the adrenaline still coursing through me, the food order long forgotten. That was it for me, no more deliveries after dark. The memory of those masked figures, the glint of something shiny, and the eerie stillness of that neighborhood still haunts me every time I think about it. Since I was about 5 years old, our family had known a man who worked at a car dealership owned by my dad's friend. His job was to keep the car's exteriors spotless, washing, polishing, and making them gleam under the lot's bright lights. He always seemed gentle, with a quiet demeanor that made my parents take a liking to him. They felt sorry for him too, noticing his worn clothes and poor hygiene. Out of kindness, they often brought him meals, handed down clothes, and offered small gestures to make his life a little easier. My mom especially had a soft spot for him, always ready to help someone in need. In 2015, this man got a new job across the street from where my mom worked. One morning, as she was heading into her office, she spotted him and gave a friendly wave, which he returned with a shy smile. It seemed like a harmless moment, a chance encounter with an old acquaintance. But soon after, he started calling her. At first, it was just occasional check-ins, but the calls grew more frequent, sometimes multiple times a day. My mom, being the kind-hearted person she is, maybe too kind, didn't want to be rude. Instead of ignoring him, she'd pick up, chat briefly, and try to keep things polite. She didn't think much of it, assuming he was just lonely and reaching out for connection. But his behavior began to shift. The calls became relentless, and his tone grew intense, almost possessive. He'd linger on the phone, asking personal questions or making comments that left my mom uneasy. Finally, she'd had enough. In a firm but gentle way, she told him to stop contacting her. For a while, it seemed to work. The calls stopped, and life returned to normal. My mom thought the matter was settled, a brief discomfort that had passed. Months later, though, things took a darker turn. My mom started noticing his car parked across from her workplace. At first, she wasn't sure it was him, but then she caught glimpses of his familiar figure slouched behind the wheel, watching her. Day after day, he'd sit there, his eyes fixed on her office building. It was unsettling, but my mom, ever trusting, didn't see it as a serious threat. She'd wave it off, telling herself he was harmless, just lonely. She didn't mention it to anyone, not wanting to stir up trouble over what she thought might be nothing. Then, one evening in October 2016, everything changed. My mom was leaving work with a male coworker she was friendly with. They had a professional relationship, nothing more, but they often chatted and got along well. That night, they were headed to a mandatory work event, and since it was expected to run late, my mom decided to carpool with him to avoid driving home alone in the dark. As they walked to his car, she didn't notice the familiar vehicle lurking nearby. But he was there watching, his mind spinning a dangerous narrative. He saw my mom with her coworker and jumped to a wild conclusion. He believed she was having an affair. He followed them. My mom and her coworker arrived at the event venue, a banquet hall across town. While her coworker stepped out to confirm they were at the right place, my mom waited in the passenger seat, checking her phone. Without warning, the car door flew open. It was him, the man from the dealership. His face was twisted with rage. Before my mom could react, he leaned in and slapped her hard across the face. She froze, stunned, her cheeks stinging as he stormed back to his car. She watched, heart pounding, as he grabbed a knife from his vehicle and slashed her coworker's tires, the blade glinting under the streetlights. The coworker, alerted by the noise, rushed outside, but the man was already retreating. Despite clear security footage capturing the entire incident, the coworker chose not to press charges, perhaps out of shock or a desire to avoid conflict. My mom was shaken, but kept it from my dad. She knew his temper was explosive, and with his history of domestic violence, she feared he'd take matters into his own hands, possibly landing himself in serious trouble. For a few days, she tried to move on, hoping the incident was a one-off. But the man's behavior only grew worse. He started calling her non-stop, leaving voicemails that sent chills down her spine. In one, his voice low and menacing, he said, "If you don't meet me at the hotel on Wednesday at 1 p.m., I'm going to tell your husband you're cheating on him." My mom's stomach dropped. She knew my dad's past, knew how he might react if he believed the lie. The thought of him lashing out, or worse, terrified her. Wednesday arrived, and the man was there, parked outside her workplace, watching her all day. His car sat across the street, a constant reminder of his presence. Desperate, my mom called my grandparents. My grandpa, a no-nonsense ex-military man, wasn't someone to mess with. He and my grandma drove straight to her office, ready to confront the situation. But when they arrived, the man turned his aggression on them, shouting and refusing to leave the premises. My mom, now trembling with fear, watched as the clock ticked closer to 1 p.m. When the hour came and she didn't show up at the hotel, she knew she had to act. She called the police. The man saw the patrol cars approaching and bolted, sprinting across the street and disappearing into an alley, leaving his car behind. The police searched but couldn't find him. Meanwhile, the calls didn't stop. If anything, they grew more aggressive, his voicemails laced with threats. Then he escalated further. One night, while my mom's car was parked outside our house, he crept up and doused it in tar. The thick, black substance coated the hood, windows, and sides, ruining the paint and leaving the car nearly unrecognizable. The repair costs were steep, draining my parents' savings. At this point, my dad found out everything. He was livid, ready to hunt the man down and make him pay. We begged him to stay calm, knowing his temper could lead to something irreversible. My mom was already planning to file for a restraining order, and she didn't want his anger to jeopardize her case, or worse, land him in jail. But the man wasn't done. He started driving by our house daily, his car slowing as it passed our front yard. Then he turned his attention to me. One voicemail to my mom made my blood run cold. He threatened to vandalize my car next. I was terrified, my sense of safety unraveling. I couldn't focus at school. My grades slipping as anxiety kept me up at night. My mom called the police multiple times, but they said their hands were tied. He hadn't physically attacked her, so they couldn't arrest him. Frustrated but determined, my mom gathered evidence, police reports, threatening voicemails, and records of his relentless calls. She petitioned for a restraining order. The court issued a temporary one while scheduling a hearing. Days before the court date, the man still hadn't been served with a restraining order. My mom called the detective handling her case frantic, but was told they were still trying to locate him. Meanwhile, his harassment spread to the rest of us. He began calling my dad, leaving taunting voicemails. One Saturday morning, I woke up to find my car covered in crude letters scrawled in nail polish across the windows. It was a chilling message, but thankfully, we managed to scrape it off without permanent damage. Still, I was a wreck, barely sleeping and struggling to keep up with my classes. Finally, the court date arrived. The man showed up, accompanied by his stepson, who approached my mom outside the courtroom. The stepson, only hearing his stepfather's side, tried to reason with her, believing she was somehow at fault. Inside, the judge reviewed the evidence, police reports, voicemails, and my mom's testimony. When it was the man's turn to speak, he claimed he had proof, a phone bill showing my mom had called him over 200 times in the past month. The judge raised an eyebrow and asked to see it. He fumbled, admitting he hadn't brought it. His story fell apart. The judge, unimpressed by his empty claims, delivered her verdict. He was found guilty of harassment, and my mom was granted a lifetime restraining order. For now, peace returned to our family, though the fear lingered that he might resurface. The ordeal left scars on my mom's sense of safety, on my ability to feel secure in my own home, and on our trust in the world around us. But with a restraining order in place, we could finally breathe a little easier, hoping the worst was behind us. In my second year of university, I lived alone in a small downstairs flat, tucked away in a busy student neighborhood. My bedroom faced the street, its large window covered by thick green curtains that gave me a sense of privacy, though I always made sure they were drawn tight. My friends lived a short 15-minute walk away, and I spent most evenings at their place, often staying until 3 or 4 in the morning, sometimes crashing there for sleepovers. I was in a long-distance relationship at the time, and late-night Skype calls with my boyfriend were a regular part of my routine, keeping us connected despite the miles between us. Halloween arrived, and I was out with my friends, laughing and enjoying the festive chaos of the night. Dressed as Supergirl, I felt bold and playful, the costume adding a spark of confidence. Around midnight, I decided to head back to my flat, eager to hop on Skype and share the Halloween fun with my boyfriend. The call started lighthearted, and soon we were caught up in an intimate moment, the kind where you lose track of everything else. I'd taken precautions, lights off, curtains firmly closed, to ensure no one could see in. I'd learned my lesson after a disturbing incident earlier that year. One night, I'd fallen asleep early with the curtains slightly open, only to wake up to the sound of someone trying to push open my front door. When I peered out, a drunk man was pressed against my window, his face so close his nose nearly touched the glass. Terrified, I'd spent that night curled up in the living room, vowing to be more careful. This time, I was certain everything was secure. The room was dark, the curtains shut tight, and I felt safe in the privacy of my flat. But as I chatted with my boyfriend, a strange flickering caught my eye in my peripheral vision. At first, I brushed it off, thinking it was just the glow of my laptop screen. But the flickering persisted, subtle but persistent, like a candle wavering in the dark. Curious and a little uneasy, I glanced around the room. My gaze landed on the curtains, where a tiny gap near the top revealed a sliver of the outside world. Through that gap, I saw something that made my heart stop, a faint trail of steam rising, like breath in the cold night air. My stomach twisted. I quickly covered myself, whispering to my boyfriend that something felt off. I crept toward the window, standing on my tiptoes to peer through the small opening. I'm short, so it took effort to see clearly. When I did, my breath caught in my throat. There, hunched over just outside my window, was a man. His pants were down, and he was frantically touching himself, his breath heavy and visible in the chilly October air. His face was shadowed, but the sight was unmistakable. Panic surged through me. I yanked the curtains to close the gap completely, my hand shaking as I grabbed my laptop and bolted to the living room, locking the bedroom door behind me. I stayed there for the rest of the night, heart racing, unable to shake the image of what I'd seen. A few days later, I came home to find a pink envelope slipped through my letterbox. As I picked it up, a couple of coins clinked onto the floor. Scrawled across the envelope's flap in jagged, uneven capital letters were the words, harm XXX. A cold dread washed over me, spreading from my chest to my fingertips. I turned the envelope over and saw, in the same erratic handwriting, an address line that simply read, "To the girl in the front room." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a cream-colored card, the kind you find in a gift shop, with a delicate watercolor bouquet on the front and the words "Thinking of you" in elegant gold script. But the message inside was anything but gentle. Written in chaotic, all-capital letters, with some backward and words misspelled, it was a rambling confession. I handed the card to the police soon after, so I can't recall every word, but the essence burned itself into my memory. The writer claimed to be an old man who'd lived on the streets for years. Whether he meant my street or just in general, I wasn't sure. He wrote that watching me on Halloween had made him the happiest I've ever been in my life. He apologized for scaring me, called me beautiful, and admitted he loved watching me, whether I was working on my computer or touching myself. He begged me to leave my curtains open just a little bit for him, promising to slip a couple of pounds through the letterbox each time I did. He signed it Ken. The words felt like a violation, each one twisting the knife of fear deeper. I stood frozen in my flat, clutching the card, feeling exposed in a way I'd never experienced before. I called my friends immediately, my voice shaking as I recounted what I'd found. They urged me to contact the police, and soon an officer arrived to take my statement. I handed over the card, watching as they sealed it in an evidence bag. They gave me a case number and promised that a patrol car would drive by my flat regularly for the foreseeable future. But they couldn't do much else. No arrest, no immediate action. The man hadn't broken in or physically harmed me, so their hands were tied. I felt helpless, trapped in my own home. For the next week, I stayed at my friend's place, too afraid to sleep in my flat alone. When I finally returned, one of my friends stayed with me, their presence a small comfort against the lingering fear. But Ken didn't disappear. Every so often, I'd hear a faint knocking at my window in the dead of night. I kept my curtains sealed shut, checking them obsessively before leaving or returning home. For 3 or 4 months, things were quiet. No notes, no steam, no flickering shadows. Then winter brought snow, and one morning, as I left my flat, I noticed something chilling. A set of footprints traced back and forth along the entire length of my front window, pressed deep into the fresh snow, as if someone had been pacing there for hours. My heart sank. I started triple-checking my curtains, my locks, my routines, living in a constant state of vigilance. After I moved out, a friend with access to the local electoral register helped me look into whether anyone named Ken lived nearby. We found a Mr. K on my old street, in a house I used to pass regularly. I never investigated further. It was a student area, and I didn't want to stir up trouble, but the discovery left me uneasy. For the next 2 years, I avoided walking past that house alone. Later, after I'd long moved out, I noticed something strange. The windows of that house were completely covered in newspaper, taped up from the inside, as if someone was trying to block out the world or keep someone from looking in. It made me wonder if Ken was still out there, still watching, still leaving his mark on someone else's life.